We can do that. Item D, closed session items. Item A, CSCA, information was shared. Item B, information.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's inspiration is the DEI cohort recognition. Good evening.
Good evening. We're so excited to be here tonight to celebrate our DEI work team. It's been doing some great work for almost the last 2 years. We believe just as cute as bringing kids. I'm sure you agree with that. But they're a great inspiration tonight. So I'm only one quick slide. Mine is just to say this is an appreciation for the team behind you. I'm going to let them do the talking and sharing, but it's also an appreciation for you, the board. The first time we really brought this broad overview of what we believe diversity and equity and inclusion should look like in our district. If you look, it was only just a couple months later that you approved a board policy. That really set the stage for the work for this team to do. And so we appreciate your support in this work. So the most important thing is the team itself. So I'm going to have the team come up that are here and introduce themselves so that they get the appreciation they deserve, and then we'll move on.
Hello, I'm Teresa Diaz, and I'm the proud principal at Tunnel Elementary School.
Good evening, distinguished board members, cabinet, and SMBSD community members. My name is Noha Kokela, and I started with Santa Maria Bonita in August of 2021. Excited to be here to serve our children of SMBSD in the capacity of Culture and Climate TOSA and DEI Steering Committee member.
Hi, good evening. I'm Mariana Cardone. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Jimenez Elementary. I'm also a part-time professor at Cal Poly. I teach social justice education and culture and education.
Buenas noches, mesa directiva.
Buenas noches.
I'm Jose Martinez. I'm the assistant principal at Tommy Coombs Junior High School, also part of the steering committee, and serve as the lead for these fine people. And I just want to really point out all the names that you're going to see on this screen, and we have a couple of screens, which is awesome. These are all members, all folks that have dedicated their time, dedicated their energy, and in many, many instances, their vulnerabilities to bring all of this together, really to bring about that vision and the policy that was approved by you all to make sure that we're doing what is right for students. And yes, I just want to make sure that know that, but I do want to acknowledge one more.
Hello, my name is Mandy David. I'm a fourth grade teacher at Alvin Elementary and part of the DEI steering committee as well. Good afternoon.
See, there's 3 pages here of folks on the team that have done the work. Some folks were able to attend more than others, right? This is on Mondays from 4 to 6 o'clock. So it's really, and lots of homework in between, and they'll attest to that, but they're the steering committee. So really, they were the ones assigning the homework, if you want to be honest. But 3 pages of it. So we're just super excited to have that. I do want to just, again, have a really big thank you. When we started this journey, it was just kind of me and trying to figure out who's our team, and immediately reached out and found this great group of folks who were willing to step up and do the work. After about 6 months, as any good leader does, you pass the baton. And so I happily passed that baton to really great hands of Eusebio and of course to Noha's support to really continue doing the work with the team. And we also do this in partnership with TNTP. Jency is the lead. Is she on? Okay, I just can't see her. Hi, Jency. Jency, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jency Knicherel. I am zooming in from Inglewood, California, just south of everyone. And I'm a director at TNTP and have had the privilege of partnering with district leaders as well as this amazing steering committee to bring this work forward. And I'm so honored to be here tonight.
Thank you. And so from here, I'm going to let them just tell you the great things. And again, it's inspiration because this is really their work and we're really excited for what they've done. So I will hand the baton over again to Eusebio.
Thank you. I won't run it back, but you heard the beginning of what I was going to say.
Got it.
So really what we did, we had almost a dozen times that we were getting together and doing a lot of the education ourselves and learning what it takes to really bring all this work back into our sites. So the educators, the adults were doing all of that learning primarily. And from there, we're starting to see what's happening at sites. And it is slowly but surely, but that's because we want to have champions at every single site. And we're getting there. Champions that represent not only the core values of the district, but also the vision of moving forward, having diversity, equity, and inclusion through all of our sites and through everything that we do. And part of the work is there, obviously, the last 2 years trying to fulfill that vision of that policy. We have our steering committee as well, some of whom are here behind me. And we did a lot of book work as well, studying CRT in the brain, school talk, because these are all things that are so important in practice. And again, it's moving forward with that vision of seeing it in practice, not just talk, actually doing it. So some of these goals that are here are based off of what we wanted to see fulfilled through that policy that you all approved, and then just seeing it all in work. And a lot of that is to disrupt the inequitable practices that we see through all different identities, race, gender, and so on, and really just growing that awareness. Before we can talk about anything else that happens on site, we have to grow that awareness. And there were adults that were breaking down, really opening themselves up, and it's a testament to how much they really were wanting to do this work, but also how much they realize amongst themselves. Now we have to extend that to our students. So as we move forward and the folks here give their impressions and what they've done, just keep that in mind, that a lot of that work was their own vulnerabilities coming forth and then moving forward. So I want to keep these goals up as our other steering committee members speak so that you can see how their work ties to what the goals are. And then we'll have someone come forward with what they've done at their site to really push this forward.
In our DEI work this year, we've taken steps towards building a community where every student feels they belong and is valued. We've also delved into identity work to explore the deeper meaning of culture with the goal of understanding ourselves as individuals and also each other as staff members, thereby creating a pathway for better understanding of our students. One of the most powerful and practical tools that we've discussed in our DEI meetings is the empathy interviews, which I've intentionally included in our PDs. And delighted to see that teachers have begun to explore this tool as a way to build relationships, break down barriers to student learning, and embrace asset-based teaching. Particularly transformative this year have been our discussions on systemic inequities, like Eusebio mentioned, which has really opened the doors for us to examine trends in our data, build common language around our strengths as well as our areas of growth. And this year, our familiarity with culturally responsive and restorative practices has grown as we continue to provide support for the rollout of our equity policy. We'll be recording a podcast for the August edition of the TNL Bulletin as an open invitation for all staff and faculty to build an awareness around the relevancy of this generational work. A major outcome for us has been the production of a guidance document, which is intended to support and sustain our efforts. And you will be receiving a copy of this document from Melissa at the Friday board memo. And my hope moving forward is for the DEI journey to be shared and used by our culture and climate teams at each site so that our work continues to be aligned and feel grounded in our vision for student success.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the steering committee and what our purpose was. The steering committee consisted of 4 classroom teachers of different ages and at different sites. We had 2 admin, our Culture and Climate TOSA, as well as the representative from TNTP. Our purpose was to help guide the work and make sure that what we were learning in each session was relevant to our district, relevant to our students, and ensure that we were supporting teachers with things that they wanted to learn and use in the classroom. We did have a lot of growth this year. Many people moved past the level of awareness, and although that is great to celebrate, it is important to remember that there is much more work that needs to be done, and we would really like more support in furthering those efforts. One thing that we would like to see is DEI implemented at a more systemic level, so that it is something that is supported not just by the teacher, but by admin and it all in every school district. I would also like to remind everyone that we have people here in our district that are ready to be leaders in this work today, and I'd like to see their voices uplifted as we move forward. Thank you.
So I'm not a member of the steering committee, but I am a 2-year member of the DEI cohort. And I just want to let you know that I have learned so much from what these guys have been providing us and what they've planned for us. And not only have I learned a lot, but I've been able to share that with my staff. So I want to share a little bit about our journey at Tunnel School with you. This year, I have been continuing to develop my skills and growing awareness with the Tunnel team to begin to build across differences and create inclusive spaces for students and adults. We began our DEI journey at Tunnel School with a book study of CRT and the brain in October of 2021, so early this year, school year. In January of 2022, we introduced the Tunnel staff to the DEI identity wheel and the concept of evaluating decisions based on a supportive stance. Using the continuum that you see on the lower left-hand side of that slide that's being presented, we challenged one another to evaluate the pros and cons of situations coming from a supportive stance for the individual. We have learned to ask ourselves, does this situation offer opportunities to support the full human talent development of every student and all groups of students or not, right? This continuum has helped us to have brave conversations and disrupt practices that limit access to an inclusive environment. This process, of course, is ongoing. We have much to learn, and we are still developing our skills together. By this past March, all of our TK and 6th grade classrooms received class sets of books that support diversity and inclusion, as well as social emotional learning. One such book is Big Bob, Little Bob by James Howe. I brought it with me tonight. This, along with many other books, was given to our primary classes. I would like to take this opportunity to just share with you how one of our primary teachers used this book as a way to open the minds and hearts of our little Tunnel Thunderbirds. One morning, as her students were lining up to begin the day, she overheard students tell one of the boys in her class, "Your shoes are pink. You can't wear pink. You're a boy." This teacher recognized that moment as a learning opportunity for her students. She remembered the book, Big Bob, Little Bob, and shared it with her class that morning. In the story, the 2 boys learned that whether you play with trucks or dolls, wear bracelets or baseball caps, what truly matters is that you like it and it makes you happy.
She then led the students in a discussion about their shoes and started by saying, "My shoes have cats on them. I like cats. They make me happy." The students had an opportunity to share what they liked about their shoes and why they made them happy. She told me that she has noticed more curiosity and less judgment with her students. This experience is just one example of many in Santa Maria Bonita School District. In the packets you will be receiving are more examples from other schools all across Santa Maria Bonita. I encourage you to explore them and see the difference that we are making here in Santa Maria Bonita School District.
Thank you.
Going to show you that everyone got a certificate and a goodie bag. And we're not educators if when we give a present, we don't give another book to start reading.
There you go. I wondered if there was a book in there.
Thank you for the presentation.
Where's the Starbucks gift card?
To stay up and read the book.
Right.
I know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. May I ask where the book collections came from, who the publisher is, and is that information being shared?
This is Jency calling in, and I can address that question. So the two texts that we utilized in the cohort were CRT in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond and School Talk by Micah Pollock. Both of those texts are included in the guidance document that Melissa will share with you Friday. And you can read more about the publishing companies for each. These were our source texts, though.
And then the books for the primary grades. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jency. And just as a final to Jency, she also works with our leaders on our first instruction and the work we're doing there so that we have seamless equity work and the DEI work always moving into the work that we're doing with our leaders and with teachers. So that partnership is critical for us, that it's an outside eye, making sure that everything's aligned and that we're addressing this very important body of work in everything that we do. So thank you. Thank you, Jency.
Thank you, Melissa.
Always. Absolutely. But I also, at this point, we're going to wait for our new superintendent and work with him on the next steps and direction for either another cohort or if we move to maybe more site driven. And so we're going to work with our new superintendent on that. But the work still continues moving forward. The purpose of that guiding document was so that everyone in the system had the common language, the common work. We continue to do the DEI work and everything that we're doing with leaders, which then they turn around and do with teachers. So it's not like the work stops whatsoever, but it's the piece around the cohort design that we'll work with our new superintendent on.
A point in the future after Dr. McDuffie is on, we could then ask for update on where that is if that's what you're asking, Mr. Valencia.
Thank you for letting us know.
So perhaps as a point of order, after Dr. McDuffie has begun to work with staff, then we can ask for something like that to be agendized later on so that we could get an update as to what's in place and how things are moving forward and what the goals are for 22, 23 or something like that.
Yeah, and the one slide I deleted is we're trying to keep it shorter than it was how many times we've updated since we've started to the board, and it's been 4
Okay.
already, and plus a couple board memos. So my intention is that, of course, we'll continue updating you, of course, but just what it looks like, I think, was how I was answering that piece. So, of course, we'll continue updating.
Thank you, guys. Whew.
A lot of work has gone into this.
That's
Yeah.
great stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Item D, calendar of up and coming meetings, activities and events. June 22nd, 2022, Santa Maria Bonita School District Study Session. Item 4, public comment period, open session. The public comments are intended for members of the public to address the Board of Education on items involving the school district. Such testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each, 450 words per person, subject, and 15 minutes total each topic. If an answer to a specific question is requested, the board president will, if appropriate, direct administration to respond in writing. Do we have any public comments?
We do. We have 4 joining us tonight, and we have a couple written comments.
Want to go with the written, or you want to?
I'll start with the folks who are with us tonight.
Okay. Sure.
The first is Judy Montoya.
Good evening, Santa Maria Bonita School Board members.
Good evening.
Hello.
I'm going to start off by saying I'm really nervous to be up here, but I'm doing this for my kids who encouraged me to do so. My name is Judy Montoya, and I am a 3rd grade teacher at Santa Maria Bonita School District. I currently have 3 of my own children attending school in the district. I am here today to share some of my concerns that I have as a parent. One of my biggest concerns is that we have taken away the ability to celebrate some of the most important milestones that our children reach as students. In the past, we were able to hold large celebrations for our 6th graders moving on to junior high and for our 8th graders moving on to high school. I myself attended schools in this district, and some of my most special memories were my 6th grade and 8th grade promotion ceremonies. I remember feeling so proud of myself and seeing the joy in my parents' faces. Now these celebrations are being discouraged and minimized. My question is, why? As a district, do we not feel that these milestones should be celebrated? My kids work hard to do their best in school every single day, and I feel that their hard work should be recognized and celebrated. I'm disappointed that our school district doesn't feel the same way. How am I supposed to explain to them why their cousins who attend schools in other nearby school districts are worthy of a special 6th grade promotion celebration, while we try to do everything we can just to convince our administrators that our students deserve the same? I tune into the school board meetings often, and at one of the most recent school board meetings, it was mentioned that these end of the school year celebrations are not up to the school board. When I questioned our school administrator as to who is making these decisions, he also could not direct me to who I could speak to at the district office. Why is no one taking accountability for making these decisions? And why is the input of the stakeholders not being taken into account? This brings me to another issue I have. I also know that teacher input isn't being taken into consideration in a lot of important decisions. All you will need to do is take some time reading the panorama surveys to see how teachers are currently feeling. We need to trust that our teachers want the best for our students, and right now, teachers aren't feeling trusted or respected as the professionals that they are. I purposefully made the choice to send my students to school in this district because I know that we have some of the best and most dedicated teachers. I see it every day, and I just wish our district admin could see it and truly believe it too. Thank you for your time.
The next is Marta Rodriguez.
Good evening, Board. My name is Marta Rodriguez, and I am the parent of an outgoing student and incoming sixth grader. I am here today because as parents, we are having a very difficult time trying to understand why a long-standing tradition of holding eighth grade graduations was taken away. It was taken away with zero explanation or parent discussion. We are here because we want an explanation. We want to hear the why. And with all due respect, COVID is not an excuse, but poor planning is. The neighboring districts were also affected by COVID and are holding eighth grade graduations. Eighth grade graduations are a symbol of hope and the start of a new journey. Students have to work hard to earn the privilege to be on the big stage and have a little taste of what a high school or college university graduation would feel like. In seventh grade, students were presented with all the information that would get them to the big stage, and then they got nothing. Our children have already lost enough. Honors English, algebra, battle of the books, science camp, field trips, reading novels in class, competitive sports, the district-wide track meet, and now to finish it all up, eighth grade graduation. Really? A mediocre drive-through and certificate of completion in the yellow folder is all students and families deserve? Wow. This just proves the lack of interest and knowledge in the community. Students obviously do not come first. Eighth grade graduations do not represent the end of an educational journey. To us, it is just the start of success. Bring back eighth grade graduations. I graduated from Fessler Junior High, June of 1993. And obviously, that was not the end of my educational career. And the parents of this community do not have a voice. My parents were those parents, and I was one of those students in Santa Maria Bonita. I will use my bilingual voice to represent the parents and the students. Thank you.
Is Celia Grimaldo?
Good evening, board members. Just like Ms. Montoya, I'm very nervous to be here. I actually wrote this in the car really quickly, and after hearing theirs, I'm like, I have so much to say, but I will come back and say what I really want to say at a different time. I am the parent of two students, one that's actually leaving, and these last couple of years, all of our students, especially our eighth graders, got a lot of things taken away. No sports, no trips, no graduation. It's very hard to explain to my own child, why are we the only ones not being allowed to play sports? Why are we not being able to do field trips? Why are we not getting a graduation? When on social media, all the parents put all this information out there. Just today, I believe it was Lakeview and Orchid Junior High celebrated with their caps, well, not with their caps, but with their gowns, slap in the face to our students in our district. I'm not sure why or who is making these decisions, but those who did need to reconsider what is best for our students and our community. Every milestone is important and needs to be celebrated. Many parents in our community, if you know, they work in agriculture. They took the day off. For what? To have a drive-through that took 10 seconds? That's embarrassing. That is so sad. I want you to turn around and look at that picture that I'm looking straight at right here. There's 3 students. Right behind you, there's a picture of you guys in the boardroom. 3 students with their gown. We have a couple of 8th graders in the back. That was taken away. Again, who made this decision? They see pictures of me and Mike now from El Camino, 1994. And then I have pictures of them in the car, waving. I timed it, 5 seconds from start to end. It took me longer to get to their school than it did. If I would have blinked, I would have missed my son. I hope that in the future, just like the other two parents, that you guys really consider what's important for our students, because we're all here for the same reason. To help our students be better students, to help them be something more. All three parents that spoke, we're all, I forgot the word, I'm missing the word, we're all product of this district. And I'm very proud to have my students be in this district. But it's a shame that all this fun activity celebrations are being taken away. Thank you.
Next is Diego Grimaldo.
Hello, board members. My name is Diego Grimaldo. Yesterday was my final day as a student for this district, and I'm here because I want to address the fact that my school, Arianas Junior High, did not have a graduation. They also did not have sports. Other school districts, such as Nepomo and Orchid Junior High, did have these things, and I would like the incoming students to enjoy these activities unlike I did. I am also here to say that English honors needs to stay. It would be unfair for the students at a higher level to not be pushed to their fullest potential. Thank you.
I have our written comments. This comment is from Marta Rodriguez. The LPAC language proficiency assessments for California, a test each year that reminds you that you are just not American enough. Your English is just not enough, yet you were born in the USA. Imagine getting this message each August, each year, over and over again. The message is that being bilingual is a detriment rather than an asset in the state of California, in Santa Maria Bonita School District. I don't oppose testing since I understand assessing informs instruction. However, SMBSD's added criteria to reclassify students is too strict and prevents students from moving away from English learner status. Receiving a 4 in the LPAC is difficult enough. I encourage parents to look at the released LPAC test samples for their child's grade. I have 2 young children in the dual language immersion program at Jimenez Elementary. Both are bilingual children who have to pass the LPAC with a 4 and meet the other criteria. Since they are in the DLI program, they are at a disadvantage in passing the LPAC and meeting all the other district criteria. What can be done? According to California Ed Code, the LEA or local education agency can establish its own locally approved reclassification process. Why is the district making it so challenging to reclassify students, especially long-term English learners that have been in U.S. schools since kindergarten? High schools are bursting at the seams with long-term English learners, LTELs, who are kept from taking elective courses in high school and instead must take second English classes, all because they were not reclassified in elementary or middle school. I request that the SMBSD reevaluate and revise their reclassification criteria so that more bilingual students are RFET, reclassed as fluent English proficient. Your current reclassification criteria are detrimental and punitive towards bilingual students. I know I speak for a lot of parents, and as a parent, I would like to see the reclassification process revisited at SMBSD. Gracias, Marta Rodriguez. The next comment is from Jessica Spencer. Good evening, Santa Maria Bonita School District Board. Thank you for allowing me to make my comment. My name is Jessica Spencer, and I'm a parent of 3 students in our district. I'm concerned about the safety of our students, teachers, and staff. With the recent headlines, I cannot stay silent about the need to increase our security protocols. How can I help? I suggest cameras and an entry bell that vets anyone, parents, volunteers, etc., to our campus, and maybe a security guard. I don't have the answers, but I believe we can work together to protect our most vulnerable and innocent. Our children and our teachers and staff deserve our protection from trauma and harm. Let's be proactive. How can I help? Thank you for listening, Jessica Spencer.
That's it. I have one that was sent to me to read. It was read before, and I talked to Dr. McDuffie, and I'm going to go ahead and read again, and then I'll have a response from Dr. McDuffie. Hi, my name is Lucia Santos Ramirez. I am currently a senior at Santa Maria High School. I'm trying to advocate for ethnic studies in the Santa Maria Bonita School District. As someone who was privileged to be part of the ethnic studies class, I'd like to give children the same privilege. Seen as a sudden change of expressions and emotions came over my 9-year-old sister. I came to the realization that she too has been failed by the education system. While she may still be young, I'd like her to have the privilege of having a better understanding of ethnic studies. Although my passing of knowledge has educated her, I can only do so little for the rest of the younger generations. With the help of ethnic studies in the elementary and middle schools, we can begin to break down the ideas which were meant to be implemented within our minds. If creating change among the way minorities are viewed is your goal, then allow ethnic studies to pass. Without this change in the education system, we minorities will continue to be set up for failure, as we don't know ourselves exactly. For generations, minorities have been fighting for equity, but this history is often shut between books. The education system is not the only system failing us, but it is the start. This addition of courses will begin to change the way children view themselves and others. It will allow them to understand the way our system works. They'll become driven to pursue a higher education after they know the truth about the path we were destined to follow. Ethnic studies will not only better educate our youth, but it will bring out the leaders within them. Change will be created and equity will begin to emerge. And I shared this with Dr. McDuffie, and he has reached out to Mrs. Ramirez, and he has had his staff get in contact with her, and he will be meeting with her to sit down and look at our ethnic studies when he is in place here coming in July. So we'll go from there. Okay, let's see. Item A, comments on agenda items.
Just a point in order, maybe I was looking at the discussion items, and I was going to ask if we could move items 8C through 8F in regards to the budget to after the remainder of the discussion agenda portion of the agenda. Typically in the past, we've done that so that the other items that are being presented can be done so in a timely fashion and not feel like we're at the end of the meeting and trying to expedite at a late hour.
Okay, so you want to move item 8A and F and do G, H, I, and J first? Okay.
Move 8C, D, E, and F to following the J, discussion of technology support technician. So it would be the public hearing for the budget, budget study session, public hearing for the reserve requirements, and then the reserve requirement review.
Okay, and so A, B, then go F, G, H, I, J, and then follow up with C, D, and E. Okay, do I have a motion? Or are we good with that?
I'll move to approve the agenda as modified.
I second.
Ms. Cordero approves the modification. Ms. Flores second. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollinshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Motion carries. Item B, comments on non-agenda items, approval, right? Approval of agenda is presented.
I make a motion? Just that,
As modified.
but modified.
As modified.
Been modified.
Thank you.
Yes, that's right. I'm sorry, we did that already. Consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Prior to that, I'd like to move to remove the minutes. So item A, minutes of the Board of Education meeting. So I'd like to pull that for discussion.
Do I have a motion?
I don't think those require a motion.
Okay, so we'll pull item A for the end of the meeting. Discussion. Do I have approval of the
I'll
consent?
move to approve the consent agenda as amended with removal of item A.
I have a second.
Second.
Mr. Hollingshead moves, Mr. Valencia second. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero? Aye. Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye.
Valencia?
Aye.
Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Motion carries. Action item 7. Motion to designate secretary to the board, currently interim superintendent Beecher. Mr. Beecher, good evening.
Good evening. This is an item of business just to acknowledge Dr. McDuffie is coming as the incoming superintendent July 1st and will need to replace me as secretary on the board. Sorry. This is an item that recognizes that starting in July 1st, Dr. McDuffie will be taking the superintendency and I'll be stepping down from the interim superintendency. And so this is just part of making sure that the authority is there for him to step in and I'm removed from it.
I look forward to Mr. McDuffie. You've done a good job, but Dr. McDuffie to be coming in.
I'll move that the Board of Education designate incoming superintendent Dr. Darren McDuffie as secretary to the board effective July 1, 2022.
I second.
Ms. Cordero moves, Ms. Flores second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, Resolution 2132, Resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Maria Benito School District Delegation of Governing Board Powers and Duties. Mr. Beecher.
Thank you. This item as well is similar to place Dr. McDuffie amongst authorized signers and place the delegation of the board's authority to carry out the business of the district. Similarly, acknowledging that starting July 1st, he'll step into the role of superintendent.
I'll move that we adopt Resolution 21-32, Resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Maria Bonita School District, Delegation of Governing Board Powers and Duties, and approve the attached authorized signature list. Just so that everybody knows, that would include Dr. Darren McDuffie, Matthew Beecher, Brian King, and Kimberly Norton, those three in the Business Services Office.
I second.
Ms. Cordero moves, Ms. Flores second. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero? Aye. Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Motion carries. Item C, Resolution 21-33, a resolution of the Board of Education of Santa Maria Bonita School Districts requesting consolidation of their biennial election for the November 8, 2022 consolidated general election. Mr. Beecher.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. The statewide general election will be held on Tuesday, November 8th in 2022. On this date, the Santa Maria Bonita School District Governing Board members will be elected to fill terms that will expire on November 30, 2022. Terms that expire will be those of Ricky Lara and Vita Alvarez Flores. Resolution 2133 indicates the date and purpose of this election. And then we received this from San Luis Obispo County. It comes up on occasion that we do have to file the exact same paperwork with San Luis Obispo County as we do with Santa Barbara County, because there are portions of our district boundaries that actually are in San Luis Obispo County. It's one of the reasons why our original name was the Santa Maria Union. I think it was Union Elementary School District. Union signifies that you have more than one county in your district. And so they have to file all of the same paperwork every time we have an election with both counties. Kristen worked really hard and got support from our county education office to get updated resolutions from San Luis Obispo County recently. And so we share that with you tonight for your consideration and approval.
I'll recommend that the Board of Education adopt Resolution 1933, a resolution of the Board of Education of Santa Maria Bonita School District ordering governing board member elections and requesting consolidation of their biennial election with the November 8th, 2022 consolidated general election as presented.
I'll second.
Mr. Valencia moved, Ms. Cordero second. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollenshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Item 7D, resolution number 21-34, resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Maria Bonita School District designating certain committed funds as unrestricted general funds. Mr. Beecher.
Thank you very much. I'll quickly provide an introduction to this before Mr. King gets started. You have two very similar resolutions before us tonight. One undoes a resolution committing funds that we brought to the board earlier, and the other replaces those commitments. So one is the undoing of prior commitments, and the other is the replacement of questions, maybe why they're so similar. But this is not new in finance, in school finance or governmental finance, but the requirement that we're meeting with these activities is new. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. King to carry the conversation with you, and of course be available for questions when we're in the middle of it.
Thank you, Mr. Beecher. I think you handled it. I think we're done. I'll give a little more detail. So back in June of 2021, a resolution was brought to the board to commit certain funds. At the time, we were anticipating that in the near future, the district would be required to keep our ending fund balance reserve under 10%. And as a result of the balance in the state's public school system stabilization account, the statutory limitations on school district reserves has been triggered for 22-23 per Ed Code. So the items committed back in June of 2021 was $4 million for the K-8 math textbook adoption. And also the board wanted to follow a recommendation by the Government Finance Officers Association and decided to commit an additional 14% of the general fund ending fund balance in addition to our 3% reserve requirement. So back in June of 2021, we were still learning about the requirements of what we can commit and what we could not commit. So like Mr. Beecher mentioned, once the board commits funds, the only way to uncommit or release the committed funds is for another board resolution. So this is what I have for you tonight. And we're requesting that the board uncommit these funds. And then my next board item is another resolution to designate certain general funds as committed funds. So we first need to release the current commitments in order to assign new commitments.
Questions? Motion?
I'll move that the Board of Education approve Resolution 21-34, designating certain committed funds as unrestricted general funds.
Second.
Ms. Cordero moved, Mr. Hollenshead second. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollenshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Lara?
Aye. Motion carries. Item 7E, Resolution 2135, resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Maria Bonita School District designating certain general funds as committed fund balance. Mr. King, good evening again.
Good evening. So this resolution intends to establish the board's commitment to constrain $22,102,356 for English language arts, history, social science, health education, and science textbook adoption. Also to constrain $26,132,963 for certificate of participation debt service payments, and to constrain $22,429,326 for future other post-employment benefits. And that totals $70.6 million.
I don't necessarily remember seeing, the other one I remember seeing broken out before, but this one, this one also stands out just for the sheer size. Just a comment. But I'll move to approve Resolution 2135, designating certain general funds as committed fund balance.
And I'll second.
Mr. Hollingshead moves, Ms. Cordero second. Roll call.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead?
It's true.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Oh,
There you are.
aye. Excuse, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Okay.
Motion carries. Item F, declaration of need for fully qualified educators. Ms. Beltran, good evening.
Good evening, Board President Lara, Board of Trustees, Interim Superintendent Beecher, staff and community. Tonight we bring you this annual form, which is required by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, that we adopt a declaration at a scheduled public meeting. It is in order to meet any anticipated needs. We are feverishly, one of those words, hiring as we can the best candidates for our district, and always looking for individuals that meet all credentialing requirements. But there are times when we need to hire individuals on a limited assignment permit or a short-term staff permit, or even as an intern candidate, because they're towards the end of their credentialing requirements. These are estimated numbers. They are the numbers that we've utilized in the past because we find ourselves sometimes in the position. I will tell you, in special education, we are short 2 employees right now, doing really well at hiring qualified candidates. So we're hoping that we don't find ourselves in a position where we need as many as are listed here in the estimates. But I do want to point out that on page 4 of 4, because this document first goes to you for approval and then it is signed and submitted, there is, we need to amend the section where it says, if no explain. You'll notice it's blank. That's a non-typographical error. Nobody typed it in. It will be amended prior to signing to state, we allow for intern candidates when deemed necessary. So we cannot hire someone with an intern credential as long as we have fully credentialed individuals available to hire. But there are times when we do find ourselves in a position where a candidate is finishing up their credential and may work for us with an intern credential. Any questions?
I was just curious as the, and just below that, thank you for explaining the entry there. Other accredited universities as needed. For our pipeline, was that going to be in conjunction with?
For the
Laverne or?
Our Build Our Own is a residency model with Cal Lutheran.
With Cal Lu, yeah.
Right. And we're not entering into that for the 22-23 school year, but that would be on there for the 23-24.
Okay.
But we put any other accredited universities as needed because we have classified staff and other staff that are working at a program, perhaps at another university. Sure. As long as they're accredited, we work with them. And Brandman was what you would have seen last year. They're now called UMass. So that's what UMass is.
Brandman is?
Brandman University is now UMass.
Their name. Right in the middle of the quarter or the year.
Oh.
Ms. Beltran, I have a question. It looks like the estimated number of folks we need for the CLAD are 3.
and folks that have the bilingual authorization at 2. Do you know if these 3 plus 2 equals 5? Can these folks teach our dual immersion courses?
Currently, we're fully, knocking on wood, we're fully staffed for our dual language immersion program. We put down the estimate of 3 because sometimes we find ourselves hiring out-of-state candidates who don't necessarily have the California language acquisition. It's really called an ELA authorization now, but they may not have it. And so we put that in with CTC so that we're covered. Same thing with the BCLAD. But we've been very fortunate to find our employees that are fully certified. I can point to last summer where we hired somebody late July who came from Florida, an outstanding candidate, and they needed that waiver for 1 year because of coming to California and needing that authorization.
And the reason I ask is I know from the community, there's been a great demand, right, for more dual immersion courses, right, for all of our students throughout the district. And so that's why I'm asking to make sure that we have enough staff, that we're being very proactive, right, about recruiting that staff so that our dual immersion program can expand.
Right. Our only dual immersion program right now is at Jimenez Elementary School. But we are fully staffed for those BLI classes at this time, and with people with BCLADs. But we continue to look for bilingual and multilingual candidates at all times, regardless whether they're in general ed program, special education program, or BLI.
And I did want to bring attention to the board that recently I spoke with a teacher who felt that we might have overlooked a bilingual teacher who was hired for a position here in our district, but they were not hired. But this educator apparently was hired in surrounding districts. So my follow-up question is, what protocols do we have in place to ensure that we have an equitable process when we do our hiring to make sure that we're not overlooking qualified applicants?
So we paper screen our candidates, and we're always looking for credentialing requirements. We're looking for bilingual, multilingual. I will tell you that so far we've had a really strong, robust response to any of our teacher vacancies. We've had over, I think, 100 candidates apply, most recently, not counting English interviews today, but we did elementary interviews a few weeks ago, because we have to go through our district transfer, site transfer, and district transfer process before we can open up to the outside. But we interviewed 16 candidates, many of which were bilingual, for 3 vacancies at the time. So we let our candidates know that we are interviewing 16 candidates for 3 vacancies. It was 2 6th grades and a 3rd grade. No, 4th grade, sorry, my apologies. Might have been 3rd grade. But it was 2 6th grades, 1 3rd grade. We had 3 vacancies at the time, 16 candidates, and we selected the most promising candidates from the pool. Remaining individuals on that roster of individuals that we interviewed were informed that we will be calling them back for interviews as we determine more vacancies. And they're not held to us. They will go and work somewhere else if necessary, but we are seeing a really strong response to our vacancies out there in the community, especially with allowing for year service credit. But we are looking for the right people for each position at all times. And I will tell you that we have a ranking process, and there's a large interview panel, and we are looking with the questions that are really talking to the work that we're doing here in Santa Maria Bonita School District, making sure they're culturally competent and things like that. Our questions are eliciting those responses.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to make sure, right, that all of our community and our staff, right, feel that our process is equitable, right, that it's fair, right. I would hate for us to have the reputation of being a district, right, that turns down, diverse and qualified talent. And so that's why I'm curious, do we ever do like an audit of our hiring process to make sure that it is equitable?
I have not been involved in an audit of our hiring process, but I do know that Dr. McDuffie asked for us to do an equity audit, just because of his experience in the past where they identified a need in hiring more, I believe he said, Asian Americans. But I personally am committed to looking for a very diverse representative pool of candidates. without violating any hiring requirements of being open to all and not discriminating against any.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical, right? Today, we just had the DEI folk presentation, right? And they're talking to us about the importance of eliminating barriers, right? Of addressing, bias, even in our children's literature, right? Unfortunately, we see that unless we're intentional about it. And so that makes me think about also like, that the research of Beverly Tatum, she talks to us about the importance of having a diverse group of people doing the interviewing, because if we don't have a good diverse group of people doing the interviewing, we often don't get diverse talent. And so I want to put that on the attention, right, of the board and of our staff, just to know that we need to be very intentional about that work, right, democratizing the hiring process. I know that some districts even include students as a part of the process. They include parents, because these are the folks that are going to be interacting, right, with our teachers and our leaders. And so that's something that I want, the board to also consider in the future is, right, and I'm glad to hear that, Dr. McDuffie is already initiating that process so that we could just take a really critical look at our doing our due diligence to be equitable and to be fair to all the folks that we hire, including who's doing the interviewing.
Right, and I will let you know.
Just a reminder, we did do an equity audit this year. We did do an equity audit and HR was part of it. And we did provide those results to the board, which showed that the diversity of our staff is higher than the county, and it's higher than the state, and it was higher than the nation. And so we did just do one. I think it's great to do another one, but I want for public record to know that we did do one this year and we got very positive results. And, that's the hard work of everyone involved. Nothing's ever good enough. So we'll all continue working hard, but I did just want to remind the public of that. Thank you, Bijou.
And does that apply to our administrative staff or only our teaching staff, which you're referring to right now?
We looked at teaching staff because that was really what we were hearing from you and from others on the board, that we needed to look at that for teaching staff. So that's how we did the audit.
I definitely want to make it clear that at all levels of diversity, it's critical, not just for our teaching staff. I'm proud that we're improving the diversity of our teaching staff, but I want to see that reflected throughout the district, particularly in leadership roles as well. Because from the community, that's what I'm hearing as well, is that they're noticing a pattern, that there's a lack of diversity in our leadership roles, and that needs to change.
If I may, Mr. Valencia, I don't know that, and I'm going to take some liberty here just because this has been my heart's work since I went into education. I'm the daughter of two immigrants to this country who, I may not look the same as every one of our students, but I've been in education with our students and acting as if I really believe we have to hire the right people for our students so that I can state it's someone I would want teaching my own children, because we need to be advocates for our children. And I want to recognize all of our teachers that are already working for Santa Maria Unity School District, and just ensure the board that we are looking for the right candidates, and that we are committed to having difficult conversations when they are not the right candidates. So it is really looking at, and I believe our Pathway to Teaching program is really looking at increasing the diversity even more so, but we are all role models to our students. And I don't want to disparage any of our current teachers into feeling that they are not the appropriate teachers for our students. So I humbly want to let you know that we are doing everything to increase the diversity and are working with universities and working with partners and working with our community. But our students will learn from all of us when we're the right role model.
And I agree, but I think it's also important to consider the fact that good leaders and good teachers come in all colors. I think that's
I'm not arguing with Mr. Valencia. My children are
correct,
Hispanic,
so
National Hispanic Scholars. They're representative as well. So I just need you to know that, because I don't want any of our teachers to take offense, and we need to follow what we promise of not discriminating against anyone for race, gender, and there's a long list there.
I do want to just step in really quickly to say a lot of this conversation is connected to an item and a lot of it is not. And it's not really fair to folks who weren't aware that this conversation was going to occur, because a lot of this isn't agendized. So I want to make sure that we turn to the item that's agendized as far as the declaration for the need of highly qualified teachers.
And Mr. Beecher, just to be clear, this process is about how we recruit, how we retain, teachers. I'm just extending that to, the rest of our staff. That's all. And from the community, for the community's sake, I think it's really critical that they understand what is our process for hiring, right? So that it's transparent, right? So if they have questions, they know who they can talk to, because this is clearly on the minds, right? In fact, we just went through by trustee areas. But the whole purpose of that is to make sure that we have diverse leadership right here as a board, right?
Right.
So we want to make sure that we see that all levels of leadership.
And Mr. Valencia, I would assure you that, well, I'm not going to assure you, but I would believe that probably more than one bilingual candidate was not selected in the last round because we had 3 vacancies and 16 interviewees. And again, we were looking for bilingual, multilingual candidates that are representative of Santa Maria area and of our students.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just looking, if you have any more questions for this declaration of need, or as it's required, and again, it will be adjusted to state we allow for intern candidates when deemed necessary. This is an action item.
I'll move to ratify the declaration of need for fully qualified educators for a 22-23 school year as presented.
Mr. Hollingshead, Mr. Hollingshead moves, Mr. Valencia seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Discussion items. I forgot. Item H is going to be pulled. It wasn't supposed to be in this board packet meeting. It was supposed to be in the next meeting on the overview of universal transitional kindergarten. So there won't be an item H.
Wait, what?
Item H.
H?
Yeah.
Okay. I did a lot of extra reading for nothing.
Yeah, no.
I'm just prepared.
Well ahead.
Well ahead. No, sorry.
You're well ahead.
It is scheduled for the next board meeting. So,
Is that only item H, or does that also include I as well?
no, just H.
That's
The other one's a board policy, just a review of it.
Do we, just as a point of clarification, do we need to vote to make that change at this point?
Because we already approved the
Right, we
agenda.
approved it as presented. So I think my suggestion would be
Yeah.
that when we get to it,
Table it.
we'll just
Table.
make a motion to table it.
Okay. That'll
That's
work.
my suggestion.
Thank you.
good suggestion.
Thank you. Okay, item A, public hearing of local control and accountability plan. Ms. Dutra.
I'm so excited to invite Ms. Herrick to the microphone. The team has been working so hard on our LCAP for this year, and just before she starts, just really taking the feedback from all of our educational partners. We all read, there's a comment earlier, we all read every single survey that's turned in, every single word, and we really, and their team does a phenomenal job of really looking and listening to what folks are asking for and how can we incorporate that. And so really excited for Ms. Herrick to share a little update on the indicators tonight. So thank you. Only 2 meetings left.
Laura, you have a point of order, so can we open and close the public hearing before Ms. Herrick starts on B?
That down.
The public hearing where?
Public hearing is
first
A.
one.
So we need to open and close that first. Ms. Herrick's supposed to start on
I'm
B.
sorry, I'll open it. I'll open
Just
it.
a point of order that because they go so quickly, those public
Yes.
hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Hollingshead.
And then what I said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Dutra. Good evening, board members, interim superintendent, Mr. Beecher, cabinet members, and community members in the audience. And as Ms. Dutra shared, I will be providing an update of the LCAP and state local indicators. These are updates that were made following the last board presentation on May 11th and after the final LCAP team meeting and the DLAC meeting. So before I get started, I wanted to share with you a quote from Tony Thurman, the California State Superintendent of Public Instruction. It was a topic of discussion at our last LCAP collaboration team meeting. When we think about students' needs right now, we think about more globally. Students and families have been through incredible trauma during the pandemic. As we have considered next year, we have ensured that we are continuing to create ways within our plan
to make it a priority to help students heal from what they have been through. As we worked on the plan, our priority has been to create a plan that supports our district vision of student success and to ensure that the plan is one that helps students recover from learning loss, transforms schools to include programs for our youngest learners to our 8th grade students, and provides wraparound supports. We feel that our Lcap draft, including all the actions and services, will support these needs, but we understand that the plan can be fluid and that adjustments will continue to be made according to our students' needs. So just a quick reminder, we've gone over this several times. This is our plan summary, and you will see this in our actual plan. It has the number of students we have currently, 17,201. That's our TK through 8th grade students. And then we also have our preschool students, which is about 531. You could see that we have 82.62% of our students are considered social economically disadvantaged. 54.83% of our student population are English learners, and 0.47% are foster youth. 91% of our students are part of our unduplicated count. You could also see on the other side is our plan summary, which will be in the Lcap. It has our reflections of our successes and our identified needs. And just a reminder, those will go all the way back to the 2019 state dashboard. So now we're going to look at some updates within the plan that were made following our last meeting when I came to the board last time. I'm going to start going through with goal 1. Also, I just want to let you know that I did bring you copies, and so that you could take them with you again of all the actions and services, because I know you want to see them ahead of time. They'll have the full description, including the budgets, how much each action cost. And we're also going to include the parent budget overview. So that will be on top, and then you'll have all the actions and services, because I know you want to be able to see that beforehand. Once the county reviews the plan one more time on Friday, they have a coherence read with me on Friday, and then we will put the actual draft again online. It's been on there, and then they're reviewing it one more time, and then the draft will be online early next week. But we'll hand those out to you this evening to take with you before you leave. Okay? So you're welcome. For goal 1, and again, these are the updates made. We had a lot of input from our educational partners. So under goal 1, we have decided that we really want to increase supplemental curriculum resources to enhance student learning, specifically in foundational skills. So this is something that a lot of teachers have requested. We've seen this in surveys. We've also seen this, a lot of our educational partners, teachers that have been in our meetings. We also have a lot of school sites that are purchasing these programs currently, and we want to make it equitable district-wide. And so we will be purchasing those, and we have included them in Action 1.1. Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
The middle sentence, increase equity and access for our transitional kinder classrooms, professional learning opportunities. Is that, because we left H off, is that in keeping with the goals that have been established for trying to get enough classroom teachers for TK where they can meet some of those criteria as well? Or is it just for?
I'll let Ms. Loftus will talk about that more later, but the second one on here is a little bit different than that.
Okay.
The second one is about equity and access for our transitional kindergartner class right now, all of our classrooms, and we really need to update their supplemental materials. And then we'll have professional learning that kind of goes along with the materials.
Oh, okay, misunderstood. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Herrick, as a follow-up question, are we going to have access to the specific amounts that the district
Yes, you will.
is thinking about? But will we see that today?
I have it in a packet for you today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think what would also be helpful, looking forward is if our community can actually see the amounts. So that way, 2 weeks later, when we come back to vote on this Lcap, we can have a better idea and the community could have a better idea of how much the district is considering allocating to each of these areas.
Right. And, we have given that, at the Lcap meeting, we give that out, and then it's also online. So that is online right now. I just want to make sure. And then we also went over the DLAC with the DLAC meeting. We went over the parent budget overview, but you will get a copy of that tonight, and it is posted online.
Excellent.
Okay.
And can we be featured prominently on our website? Because when I try to look for our LCAP, I had to do like the search box. So just make sure that it shows up nice and clear. And when I click
Yeah, it's under plan alignment. I mean, we could look into that a little bit more. I know I look at the others all the time, and sometimes they're hard to find, but we'll make sure it is under our plan alignment department.
And even the text, I noticed some of it, because some of the fonts and the colors are kind of grayish. So even as I was looking through it, it was kind of hard to read. So let's make sure that it's nice and clear
for
our community to look at.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the second one we talked about, again, it's for all of our TK classrooms, and it's really to update them and to make sure they have everything they need. And like I said, there'll be professional learning with those updates. And then the last one, under goal 1, is to increase classified staff to support expanded learning programs. And I'm going to actually read that one just because that's something really new. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. I think I'm going to read it for you. Maybe I don't have it here. I will ask Ms. Dutra to talk about that one a little bit more while I look for it in the packet. And
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the things that we know is that we definitely have more expanded learning opportunities that we're providing for students, right? And we know that our ELOP grants has a lot of money. We also know that we have 9 hours of programming that we need to be doing moving forward. We also know that there's some coverage we're going to need to do with some community partnerships with our TKs that can't quite go full day. And so keeping that in mind right now at the site, it's a site admin that's trying to manage all of the different expanded learning programs. And so we looked at best practices at some other districts. And one of the positions that many are putting into place is a position like this. Everything looks a little different everywhere, but this position would be a classified position that would be an expanded learning site support, would be a full-time position, and they would be completely over, but of course working directly with the site, but they would be over the expanded learning programs. So they would do things like planning all of the programs in alignment with Ms. Grock and their department in expanded learning. They would manage all the enrollment of students, making sure that all the kids who need to be there are there, the parent reach out, all of that work. Also, a huge component of this, and we know this to be true, the more money is the more monitoring. And so the progress monitoring is extensive that needs to be done in every single different expanded learning program. They would be in charge of that. And then again, they'd be working directly with our staff down here to help them with that. It really allows for someone to be on the ground managing all of those programs so that leaders and teachers can either be teaching in programs, they can be in meetings, they can be doing their planning, and it really allows for just to have another level of support to ensure that our expanded learning programs are as robust as they need to be, and that we have someone on site to help continue to grow those, as we know they're going to continue growing.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dutra. I did find it. It's 1.15, and again, it will be in the description of all the actions. So the next one, it's pretty extensive. It looks small, but it's pretty extensive, and we've been thinking about this for a long time, but it's under goal 4, and it's really to increase bilingual instructional assistance time for elementary schools, and then bilingual instructional assistance for the junior high schools, for the newcomer students. So I want to make sure to explain this a little bit. So I'm going to start with junior high. So right now they have a 3.5 bilingual instructional assistant to support their newcomer students. And so what we would do is increase that to a full-time position. So that each junior high would have a full-time bilingual instructional assistant. The first part of that on the top for elementary schools, I want to make sure that I'm really clear on what that will look like. So we have a lot of our TKs and our kindergarten classes going to full day. If they go to full day, they will have a full-time bilingual instructional assistant. We've already
started to hire those because that's a little bit different than this action and service, and we need them at the start of the year. We will hire as many as we can, and we will start filling those full-time TK and kindergarten classrooms first. We will still have, first grade will still have 3.5 hours. We want to increase second grade from 1.75 hours to 3.5 hours. So the more full-time we get, the more increases we will make. We want to make sure to fill the kinder positions first. And then the first grade will continue to have their same amount of time, 3.5. Second grade will increase next year. That's our goal. I also want to put in here, because we've heard a lot from educational partners, there is a concern for upper grades, especially for newcomers. So if all BIA positions are filled in first and second grades, the BIA serving in the primary grades may be used at the elementary school campuses to support upper grade newcomer students at the discretion of the school site principal. So we want to make sure then that would mean those positions would need to be filled, and then they would have some support for the upper grades.
And then, Ms. Herrick, if I can just say, this was said at the Lcap meeting, but I think it's important for this audience to also hear, is then good thing Biju's not standing in here and Matt's not listening, is that as many full-time bilingual aides that we can hire, we're going to hire. We have the funds, we have the need, and so as many as we can hire, we're going to continue hiring, because we know we're going to need them for UTK, and we know that there's a need in all of our grade levels. And so we know some folks want to stay part-time, but there's not going to be a time in the near future that we're getting nervous, squiggling in his chair. But we're going to continue hiring those. And I think that's really important to note, because we do have folks that are saying, I need support, especially with our newcomers, or I need support with kids in the upper grades. We will continue to do our very best to hire as many as we can to get the support to folks who need it.
When I was on the campus at Miller the other day, there was a fifth grade student that had been there for 4 days. Newcomer and no English. And actually it was super cute. He was really loving, he was doing great. He was working on they were working on perimeters of squares. And he was integrating himself really nicely. But it was a huge bonus that his teacher was able to speak with him in Spanish, which might not be the case in some of those other classrooms. And so there's a huge need outside of just that lower level.
I'm just hoping we can find as many as we need. I just stop breathing every time we say that, because we need them. I just want them to be there. A lot of support that is needed.
And I'll jump in really quickly. Melissa talked about how nervous this topic might make me. For a long time, the funding source that was used for instructional aides was much smaller and more restricted. A lot of times we took those from our federal funds, and there just weren't as many to go around. And so to make that leap to full time would, by effect, end up with fewer people involved, just more time. It wasn't necessarily an effective transition for many years for us to make that step. But between the additional sources of funding that we're getting in the Lcap, also the add-on for bringing additional FTE to school sites, the funding is there now. Make it plausible to say, let's take this step in this direction, which we know can add time, and we'll have the funding we need to make sure we keep just as many individuals to allow that to occur, so that our issue will be enough people as opposed to we have the money. For now, those conditions always change, but now I'm in that boat where you are, which is, what do we need to do to make sure we find those folks?
All right. So we're going to move on to goal 5. And so goal 5, we do have some changes here. So our plan is to increase junior high counselors. Currently, we have 9. We'll be increasing those. so that all of the junior highs have 3 counselors. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about the deans. But the counselors, that's one increase that we're going to make. And then a very new one is to add elementary counselors. So I'm going to read the action and service of that one. The district will provide 1 elementary school counselor for every elementary school site, 17 total. These counselors will have a positive impact on our students' overall achievement. They will support the development and implementation of social emotional programs by collaborating with the school administrators, classroom teachers, school staff, and community educational partners. Additionally, they will support classroom lessons, academic and social emotional counseling, connecting families to the community support, and parent engagement opportunities. This will improve our students' academic development, college and career readiness, and social emotional development. And so those are also brand new positions. And we'll look later at the add-on that Mr. Beecher was referring to and where some of these fall into that add-on.
This position really is meant to be a coordination of services. We have a lot of services at our sites, but to have someone that's really looking at the whole child and making sure if it's, little Matt, that what are the services that they're getting from the ORMs? What's the services they're getting from an MFT? What's this academic services that they're getting? What do the parents need? And it's someone that's really kind of case managing that and making sure that we are maxing out all of our different resources that we have at each school so that kids are getting the maximum benefit. That was another need that was needed. They'll also be supporting the new peer mentoring that we'll be doing at school sites. A few are starting this year and then more will jump on board the next year. And they'll also be a really great liaison for our parents in all of these different services, whether it be academics or whether it be social emotional. They'll also be doing restorative practices. They'll be doing restorative circles, those kinds of things. And classroom lessons on college and career readiness. They'll work closely with Sarah Cameron and the work that they're doing at the high school. So there's some good and counselors at the junior high. So we have some seamless activities happening and supports for students. And they'll also work closely with NOHA that you met earlier, our culture, climate, TOSA, and supporting that.
Can I just ask just a couple clarifying questions? How many are we going from and to how many in the junior highs? How many do we have currently?
2 sites have 3 apiece and 2 sites have 2.
So we're just adding 2
more.
Adding 2. Okay, perfect. And then when I was looking at some of our hiring, recent hires, and I was looking at the school psychologists that we've hired, they've been only assigned to special education. Rather than to the general populace. And so my concern is I would kind of like to get a little bit, and maybe it doesn't have to be here, but I would like to understand a little bit more of what the qualifications are of these guys, how they're trained, because I don't want there to be an inequity in services, school psych services. When you look on the website for the National School Psychologists Association, it's talking about being in classrooms and supporting teachers and being on school sites. So I want to kind of get a better feel for what the qualifications, what differentiates these guys, not just being a coordinator, but what makes them get that job done so that we don't have an inequitable situation when we're not putting school psychs on some of our campuses or making them available also.
Okay, thank you. We can do that.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions on those? Okay. All right. So for the next one, we are looking at, and we kind of had talked about this one a little bit, but we do want to increase our community liaison support. We have a lot of our campuses have additional community liaisons through their school site plans, and we have added that to the district plan. We want to make it equitable, and there's definitely a need for more community liaisons at our school sites. So that's another addition. And then finally, we are increasing family engagement programs, parent and community involvement. There's just an increase on the amount that we're putting towards the programs. I know Dr. Castillo-Schiffer shared her plan with the Lcap collaboration team last time, and it's an excellent plan moving forward. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well.
Ms. Herrick, we can also add to this Friday's board memo, the one pager. If you were at Lcap, you received that on our family engagement plan, but we can add that to Friday's board memo so that you could see that as well.
And so the last one I want to talk about is junior high deans. We are going to be increasing those. I know we're still talking about what that looks like. And so we know that we would like to do that. And there are some options that we're thinking about.
Yes. So what was presented at Lcap is an option, because that's what you do at Lcap meetings. You get the feedback from folks and then you come up with some things and put it out there. There's been a lot of feedback that junior high deans, the support would be better used in a second assistant principal versus having a dean. The big difference is 18 days that the dean is not on site when the principal and assistant principal are together. And they're not able to do some of the functions of an assistant principal. And so there was a request to really look into, could we just have 2 APs instead of a dean and an AP, when now that we're really looking at being instructional leaders and really everyone's responsibility is SEL and everyone's responsibility, the jobs are really merging a little bit. And so we want to look at that. We have not landed on what that is yet because we need to meet with the school sites, right? Like it's not just an Lcap meeting. We need to meet with the school sites and find out from them what the needs they have are. And does it necessitate a second AP? Is it something else? And so that's why it's up there, is that we know that there's a want there. We just need to work with teachers and leaders just to see what is the need at those schools. And the same answer for Jimenez, just so I'll throw that in here. Throw that in here.
You saw that.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. It's we don't want to presume what they need. And so we want to talk to the school and find out, like, what are the needs that need to be met? And then we can match a position to that if needed. And so that's the work ahead of us. Of course, this can't happen right away. We have people in these positions and we would need to have some formal processes in place and we need to think through that. So we don't want anyone seeing this and folks going, am I not in my job anymore? That's not it. It's looking at a long-term, like, do we have the right support staff in this new world at our junior highs? And so we'll work with those folks on that. But it is called out so that we can start that work and see what we need and if there's anything we can put into place.
I know from speaking with friends in administration at the high school campuses that typically the dean is somebody who then steps into an assistant principal role, and it's kind of that next step. So is that something that, I mean, in reference to what you're talking about with folks seeing this on, that I'm talking about their jobs, is that something that we can actively encourage or train folks or deans now to maybe fulfill those AP responsibilities?
Of course. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
All right. Something that I'm curious about is, have we looked at the pay for our community liaisons? To make sure that it's competitive, because I imagine, right, these folks I know they play a critical role in the school site, right? They interface with our parents, particularly if our admin staff are not, bilingual or multilingual. So I'm wondering, what is their compensation and to what extent does that allow them to stay at our school sites versus consider moving to another position right away? Because it seems like that's an instrumental role. I mean, it is an instrumental role. So have we considered looking at that? Because I have heard the critique, why are we hiring more administrators, right, that typically get paid, very well for hard work, but not necessarily that taking place at, those positions like community liaison. Have we ever looked into that?
I would think that's more of a HR issue, and I think
Eric, there's a process. Salary range.
So the position has a range based on its classification where it falls on the salary schedule. That determines the compensation. We we can't, as management, decide that for this position now the pay will be. That's a process that we come to working with our labor partners at CSEA, and they're all connected. I mean, that's the thing, is there's several moving parts, several classifications, and they all have a role on the salary schedule, and all are connected based on their responsibilities that come with that position. So it's not really something that we can do to just look at one position as describing.
Is there though a comparable or the same position in a like district where we can make a comparison of what that salary range is so that we can see that we're being competitive? I think is part of what Mr. Valencia is asking maybe.
It is absolutely possible. I mean, all of the salary schedules are available. I don't know how directly related the challenge we always face when we're trying to come up with comparability is that our community liaison position comes with these, hours, this set of responsibilities, and then the most closely related position in another district may have a similar name or may have a different name. Certainly their job description is going to be designed a little bit differently. So it's really hard to make sure that you're comparing apples and apples. It's part of the process that we go through with our labor partners to try and have good conversation about what those connections are and what the relationship. But that is a big part of the process. And then also CSEA statewide does a similar analysis top to bottom based on regions, and they grab bundles of districts. Here is a position called, accounting technician. All of the districts are kind of ranked on that one page to see head of the class, if you will, and who's those analyses are out there, but again, it's really hard to make sure you're comparing apples and apples.
I would also like to add counselors that were proposed. They're the teaching staff, salary schedule, also planning learning. We're on certificate or classified on the role. And we're not looking to add an additional administrator. We're looking at changing from the design of a dean, 100 so many hours design of an assistant. I'd be the first one to say, wait a minute, I'm trying to hire everybody. This is not right away. Asked for and that we're
Another way to look at that would be to see how many vacancies we're currently recruiting for community liaison, right? And if those positions are filled and have been all year, then that indicates, right? It doesn't necessarily identify, but it indicates that there might be a sweet spot in there that we've met, that we found the right pay rate.
And part of the reason why I'm bringing this up is because that's been a conversation that I've heard about our bilingual instructional aides, right? Is this feedback that I'm hearing from staff at the Lcap meetings is that they're really critical, right, to educators, especially if those educators are not bilingual. But that some of our bilingual instructional aides might not be interested in staying if they're, a part-time, which might not make them eligible, right, for many of the benefits that, our other staff enjoy who are full-time. So that's why I think it's really critical to pay attention to these pieces, right? So, because we know that they're really important pieces of the school, but we would hate to lose them if we're just not offering, the full-time position when we have the capacity for it.
If I may, Mr. Valencia, we're actually moving towards full-time bilingual instructional assistants, and they are, we have actually done a really good job so far in finding those full-time individuals that want to serve in the TK and kinder, but first our first focus will for our TK because we need to adhere to 12-1, and we're also looking at not 10-1 ratio. But our bilingual instructional have responded really well to requests to be full-time. There are some that cannot. The whole reason why they're in part-time work is part-time work, but we are then aggressively recruiting from outside as well and finding more and more candidates to help service. Nobody's come to me to say we can't find anybody. Having a good response.
All right, and the last one on here is supplemental supplies and programs to increase access to elective courses offerings for junior high
school students. And Ms. Loftus did an excellent job. She shared a whole presentation. I know she shared to the board as well. But the 3 elective classes that were going to be offered are Family and Consumer Sciences, Computer Science, Business Marketing, and Engineering and Product Development. So that's really exciting. We do need to buy a lot of supplies and programs for those classes. And so that is being included. And I'll also send you the Lcap meeting presentation, and that also includes the information that Ms. Loftus shared. And it also covered the electives as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I wanted to go over really quickly because some of these that we talked about, we presented at the May board meeting and in February about what Mr. Beecher was talking about, the additional ongoing funding. And it must be used to increase the number of credentialed or classified staff that provide direct services to students. So we need to be really transparent about this in our Lcap. It asks for a table in that. So the 15% concentration grant add-on, you can see the funding there for 2022-23. And these are the positions that will be in that funding. And they ask exactly for us to write it up this way. So you can see the elementary counselors, the full-time transitional kindergarten, full-time kindergarten, and then when it says the full-time newcomers. And remember, if we hire enough, then we'll also increase the services. But these are the specific ones, and this is the budget for it. Okay. All right, so that covers the Lcap for this evening. And again, you'll get all of the actions and services, including the budgeted amount for each one. Also, we need to cover really quickly the local indicators. I just have to bring this to your attention one more time. They are covered in the Lcap, but they have to be, we have to have evaluation tools for each of them, and they'll be posted again on the state dashboard. So I want to cover them quickly again tonight. Basic services and conditions, priority 1. We have a number of teachers misassigned. We have 0. We have 100% access to standard aligned materials. And then our facilities are in good standing. So we have met that obligation. The implementation of state academic standards, we have fully met that. And so that has been met as well. It is also written in 2 or 3 of our goals. So of one of our measuring tools. And then we have priority 3, parent engagement. Again, we have met that, and that's reflected in our Lcap in the measuring of our evaluation tool. And it also has been updated to reflect the plan that I referred to earlier that was shared at the Lcap collaboration team meeting and also at the DLAC meeting. Priority 6, school climate. School connectiveness, caring adults, high expectations from adults, academic motivation. We have met that, but that's something, right, we're always working on, and some of the services we're adding will increase the effectiveness there. And then finally, priority 7, access to a broad course of study. This one, it's really exciting this year because we are adding the electives, and the changes that we're making really help us meet this. And it's just really exciting to see the changes from when I first started working on this, on that tool. So at this time, that ends my presentation for this evening. If you have any questions or thoughts, and I will be back on the 22nd.
Promise?
What's that?
Promise?
I promise.
A question I have, Ms. Herrick, is what research are we using to support these funding kind of these funding requests? Like, have you shared that with us in terms of what research we're using to base these this funding?
I don't know if I understand your question exactly, but in order for us to spend the funding, we have to show qualitative and quantitative data that shows that we have to increase these supplemental services. So the county does go through all that. They review our plan very closely. And so when we go to spend on these types of things, we have to make sure that we're meeting those qualifications.
So this work has been vetted by Santa Barbara County Office of Education, or is it at the state level?
No, our LCAP plan is reviewed by the county and then it's approved by the school board, but they do review it and then it goes to the state level.
So we can be sure then essentially, right, that our work is backed up by research, if you will, like the things that we're allocating funds to is supported by best practices and research.
Yes, and all of our federal funds have to be researched. They have to, there's certain tools that we have, and we have to make sure that they are within those tools. And as you know, we just went through our federal program review and we did very well. And if Dr. Cerritos was here, she would share exactly all about that because, you know, she loves sharing that. But yes, they are.
And then who makes the decision in terms of the funding amount that we're going to assign to each of these things? Who makes the decision for that from our district staff?
It doesn't work that way. Not one person makes the decision. When we meet with the LCAP collaboration team, we decide on the actions and services, and then we look into the funding of how much those cost, just like they do at the site level. So teams get together at the site level. They look at what students need after looking at qualitative and quantitative data, and then they make the decisions. And then you look at the cost. You don't look at the cost first.
So just to give you just a little bit of history, Mr. Valencia, because when most of us came on the board, this process was just starting, and it was kind of like, and you may have heard me say this before, there would be a line over there and people would come up to it was very unrefined. People would come up and say, hey, I think we should restart band or something of that nature. And so it was very, it was done in a kind of a very haphazard almost way, if you will, and certainly not scientifically based. And it's evolved to be based on input from staff and needs from the community, as well as best practices and what's effective or been demonstrated to be effective. And that's kind of the accountability piece. So initially, when the funding changed, the accountability piece wasn't necessarily part of the process. And so I think what Rebecca is referring to is there are things that we do and looking for what those needs are and assessing what the funding needs to be and allocations, but that there also is a basis on which we say, yeah, we need to do that indicates it's going to be an effective use of that money. Because I think as you're probably, this is our fiduciary duty to make sure our monies are spent well. And so then the piece that's kind of been missing, or at least hasn't been as evident without the dashboard and some of those other data that we've had in the past, is the accountability, the outcomes part, where we're not really able to, and especially in your term here, be able to see any kind of correlation between this is where monies are allocated and this is an outcome, or this is effective. So we have to, I think, see that transition for what it is, and then also note that we haven't really had the feedback to kind of really assess the accountability piece for where those budgetary allocations have been made. So I think that's the hard part for the community to really be able to wrap their heads around. So it's really great that LCAP group gets together and that we then impart that information to them, and so that they can go and there's that outreach to the community to kind of bridge that gap of communication and hopefully help them to understand that we're doing this with those principles in mind that you're talking about, best practices, data driven, and those kinds of things. So I think as we get back to normalcy as far as the accountability piece goes, we'll see more of that, and it'll become maybe more evident as to how some of that stuff goes. But in my talks with Rebecca, and the whole team, that's usually how things are driven, is what's the statistical analysis of how this is going to be effective, what's the science behind it, or what's the research behind it, or best practices, all those kinds of things to help make a good decision.
And so just as a clarifying question, then which of our staff are a part of that team that decide how things
It's not just staff, it's all of our educational partners.
The LCFF funding formula and the laws behind all this require us to, we can't just have our staff. It requires us to involve all educational partners. Just like at the school sites, they have their school site councils and they have their ELACs this year within their school site council. They don't make decisions without that council, which have to include all educational partners. So a certain percent of parents, a certain percent that's just part of the laws that we, so all those decisions are made are in there, and in the Lcap, we have to explain all of our material differences. It's not like we could just spend and then, so everything's accounted for.
I understand that the LCAP is a combination, right?
Right.
That's the whole point of local accountability. But from our staff side, who are the folks that help to determine the LCAP?
We have teachers, we have classified staff, we have teachers. We have anyone's invited to the meeting, but we really have representatives from each group. So we work with the teachers, we work with the classified staff. There's some administrators that come. And so we always invite the parents, the students, and you want to have an equal balance on there. Our school site councils it's by law, they have to have a certain representation from each group. And so we always try to kind of, we follow that same type of, thinking for LCAP as well.
And I want to add in too, we do multiple surveys to check in with how the services that are being offered are being perceived, to get feedback as well. But the mindset that really has shifted since the origin that Mr. Hollins had described is that the creativity starts at the service level and identifying what services people believe improve conditions for learning, help students achieve. And those kinds of things get decided, brainstormed, and organized first. Then after we know that there's support, positive feedback, whatever it might be for those actions and services, then we go back to the drawing board with Brian King and his team, Eric and her team, to determine what are the costs of those services. We don't start with, we're getting this much money in supplemental and concentration grant dollars, what do we do? That was our mindset for a long time. What do we do with all this money? Instead, we're saying, what has to happen? What can we do? What can we move for student learning? And once we decide what those things are, what's the value? What's the cost? And the total of those things can get compared to what we're getting with supplemental and concentration grant funds, or really any other funding stream to say, these are the things and how we're going to pay for them. But the first thing that happens is we identify what we think will really flipping to a service model that says that happens first, then you figure out the funding. So it's not like a decision gets made.
I think, part of the challenge right now of understanding everything that goes into Lcap and how the funding is expended and the decisions are made is that we really, because of the pandemic, it has now affected essentially 3 school years. And until we get some reliable data to show us what changes have occurred, we're responding in large part to the information that is continuously coming at us that our kids need more SEL, that we need to make up, if you will, for lost learning. And so the preponderance of emphasis has been on extended day, on supporting classroom direct instruction with more instructional support, with increasing the number of counselors and opportunities like that. But we don't, we can do our own internal evaluation and get feedback from teachers and the participants of, how we think it is affecting our students and that we think we're doing the correct things based on the information that we have, other data that has been provided to us, the studies that are now coming out regarding impacts and et cetera. But it's the last couple of years it's been a really hard thing to pin down. Okay, we need to work in this, or we need to work on that, or we can see this is working or that is working, because we haven't really had that much hard data. That's just how I look at all of this, and in my own mind, my question to myself is, okay, this is based on some research that has been done somewhere along the way. Does it seem reasonable based on what I know about my past experiences with our students? Do I think this is a reasonable approach to the whole situation? If they wrote in the Lcap, to bring in traveling circus groups every other month to our school sites because our kids needed more or whatever, I might be thinking, I'm not too sure about that. But
I think that might have been on Mr. Zimmerman's safety list.
That's a red item.
I think that might have been also, but we as the overseers, we're not going to get hard answers to some of the questions that we have until we really can get what I refer to as hard data on how our students are doing. And some of it is going to be summative, and some of it is going to be observational, and some of it is going to be standardized. So we have to be patient, don't we?
I didn't hear Rebecca agree. I think on the 22nd, she won't really worry about patience any longer.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and team.
Yes.
Thank you. And all those, I really appreciate what you said about the site council model and also the input that we want to get from the community and the teachers and students. More student voice.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to pass out your packets really quickly.
Thank you.
Nicole.
Ms. Wiseman's going to, thank you.
And then I'll acknowledge receipt of the local control and accountability plan and local indicator updated as presented. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to see you.
And I just want to comment also about input from our collaborative partners, or whatever that new term is. My observation, and because I hear what's going on in other districts, we do far and above more parent outreach than any of our surrounding districts. Far and above.
Thank you, Ms. Cordero. Item G, California State Preschool Annual Program Self-Evaluation 2021-22. Ms. Dutra. Good evening, Ms. Loftus.
Yes, Ms. Loftus will have the next two items, I believe. Thank you.
Ready? Good evening, board.
Good evening.
Good evening, Interim Superintendent, Teacher, and Cabinet. Each year, our state preschool program engages in a self-assessment, and this evening I would just like to share the information that was gathered through that process with you. The goals of the state preschool program, there are 6 of them, and they are that children are personally and socially competent, that children are effective learners, that children show physical and motor competence, that children are safe and healthy, that families support their child's learning and development, and that family goals are being met. And in order to assess our progress in meeting those goals, we look at multiple different measures that are represented on your slide. we look at our student assessment data using an assessment tool called the DRDP. It's a desired results developmental tool. We look at the classroom environment using a rating scale called the Eckers. We survey our parents multiple times throughout the year. And then most recently this year, we also engaged in the federal program monitoring process. And you'll recall from a few months ago that there were no findings found with regard to our early childhood program. And with regard to the Eckers scale, the environmental rating scale, that's another area where we always exceed expectations. We've always been able to invest really heavily in the resources in our pre-K classrooms, which allow us to rate so very highly on that Eckers environmental scale. What I want to share with you tonight is some of the information that we gathered through our recent parent satisfaction survey, which is, again, one of the ways we measure whether or not we're meeting the goals of our preschool program. And I'm happy to share that just over 96% of our parents are very satisfied with our preschool program. 100% of our parents who responded feel that their child is happy in our program. Just short of 95% report that the pre-K staff support them as parents in how to help their child at home. And 75% share that our program staff help parents find resources in the local community in order to support their child beyond the school day. When asked whether or not our parents are happy with the hours of our program, half of them indicated that they are very pleased with the hours of the program, but the other half are really indicating a desire for a longer school day for a variety of different reasons, whether it's just access to a full day of learning, or if it's really would be helpful for them to be able to obtain a job or to get perhaps a different job. And the restrictions from everything COVID have been really hard on our preschool programs too. We rely a lot on parent volunteers, and 14% of our parents indicated they'd like to see more opportunities to get back into our preschool classrooms in order to support their child's learning. And as restrictions ease and have eased, more of that has been able to come to fruition, and of course will moving into next year. At the beginning, I mentioned that we engage also in a developmentally appropriate assessment of our students, and that is called the DRDP. And the DRDP is looking at 3 different areas. It's looking at approaches to self-regulation. So when we think about self-regulation, we're thinking about a student being curious, taking initiative, being able to share things with one another, control their feelings, those types of things. And the data that we have right now says that about 24% of our pre-K students ended the preschool year at what we would call kindergarten readiness level, right? So 24% of them demonstrated that they had those skills in place and are ready to start their kindergarten year. The other area, the language and literacy development, is looking at foundational language and literacy skills that are appropriate for a preschool setting. And it's regardless of language, right? So looking at English and Spanish. And 17% of our students ended the year meeting the standard for kindergarten readiness in that area. And then finally looking just at math cognition, which is we're talking about spatial awareness, the shapes, the difference between addition and subtraction, the patterns, classifications, all of the red things go into red group, things like that. And 20% of our pre-K learners ended the school year meeting the standard for kindergarten. And so what our team does is we look at this data and we think about how can we make improvements, because we'd like to see that number increase going into the future. And so the team, the preschool teachers, along with the preschool director, had really good conversations about that. And they set the goals that you see on this next slide. They'd really like to spend their time next year looking at the preschool learning foundations in language, literacy, and mathematics. And as a PLC, they really want to look at the data that I just spoke to and find where the outcomes are a little bit different. And then where there are different outcomes, what is causing that? What different practices are happening in the classroom that are resulting in different outcomes? So that will be a focus of their work next year. And they'll also be working, they're excited to work alongside a multilingual TOSA and a reading by third TOSA to just build upon the literacy activities that they do in their classrooms.
What is the RBT TOSA?
Reading by third.
Okay.
So when we think about all of that work under pre-K through third grade, yeah.
I just didn't know what the
RBT was for.
Yeah.
All these acronyms. So, you know, what we know is that we have great satisfaction and we have an incredible program. What we also know is that we'd like to increase our readiness skills for kindergarten. That's a primary goal of our program, and our teachers are digging in, trying to figure out what little tweaks can they make to continue to. I'm definitely interested in any input you might have, or I'm happy to answer any questions that might have come to your mind as I was talking a little bit about our self-assessment results this evening.
And then you might just a reminder that it's an annual self-assessment that comes to the board for any new board members.
And so does this mean the percentages that I saw were 24%, 70%, 25%? Does that mean that approximately for the 25%, only 1 in 4 of our pre-K students are ready for kinder? Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what do we, what is the reason for that?
I think there are a variety of reasons. You know, this year and in recent years, attendance has been an area that we are trying to improve upon, making sure that our learners are here with us every day. We also know that, the sole purpose of our program is to close these gaps so that students start their kindergarten year ready at that readiness status of learning. And while we may not have all of them there, we have a lot of them that are also, our youngest learners are approaching those areas, right? So while I call out 24%, 17%, 20%, you can see that a good chunk of students are just right there on the bubble too. And so what we know is that when they go to kindergarten, they're going to get the extra support they need in kindergarten in order to be successful in kindergarten.
And do we have any idea how our data compares to other districts of a similar size and similar demographics?
I'm certain that we do. I don't have that information to share with you this evening. We've presented a variety of data in the past, but not necessarily this particular data set. If you have an interest in that, I can absolutely put it in your Friday board packet. And then if there's further interest, come back and share additional information with the board.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Like some of the stuff that we've seen in the past, Mr. Valencia, has reflected that our kindergartners do well. Looking at testing and comparative data, our kindergartners do really well. I think the thing that we're going to most interesting and I think demonstrate efficacy is when we start looking at those kids as they get into first, second, or third grade, how they're doing with some of these skills. Because they tend to start out kinder here, and then as in a comparison to the rest of their peers, they tend to lose ground. I think that's, for me, that's the thing that I think is going to be most interesting and provocative to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm confident that our educators are doing the best they can, right, with what they know. But, you know, if there's other districts, right, that are ahead of us, right, that have similar levels of students living in poverty, right, similar demographics, we have a, 95% approximately Latino student population, right? What can we learn from them? And if we're ahead of the game in other areas, what can they learn from us? And so it's that spirit of growth, right, that we're looking after, and not just relying on one thing, right? Tests we know are also often biased and have their flaws. So not just depending on that, because it seems like from the anecdotal evidence you provided from the parents or some of the statistics, if you will, they're satisfied with the program. But obviously our parents want, their students to be, literate and socially, emotionally healthy. So yeah, I would love to see that data on how we compare to other districts that are similar to ours.
Absolutely. And thank you for recognizing that it is just one piece
I think we need
data.
to also recognize that our current state preschool program is going to be replaced by transitional kinder, and these very same students will be eligible by 425.
25, 26, all.
Yeah, in that universal transitional kinder. So there is no law that requires preschool. And the fact that we have as many state preschools on our campuses, I think speaks loudly and very clearly to our parents that we have an interest in helping every student that we can.
And the emphasis too, as we go towards UTK, is to form more and more partnerships with people with different groups in the community who provide those things, so that we can coalesce and get a unified delivery of services, and really, like you said, reach across a broader expanse of children. That's a big part of what's going to have to happen with that, in addition to things, and that's one of the things that
And later in June, we'll go into, at the next board meeting, great depth with regard to our UTK plan and talk in detail, Mr. Hong said, about what you just referenced. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I get to stay up here for the next one too.
I acknowledge the receipt of the California State Preschool Program Annual Program Self-Evaluation 2021-22 as presented. Item item I, review board policy 6170.
J.
No,
H. Table H.
Table H, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to table this item.
I'll second.
Ms. Flores. And Mrs. Cordero seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. I will table item H till next meeting. Item I, review board policy 6170.1, transitional kindergarten.
Thank you. Thank you. I bring the updated draft for your consideration this evening. The updates that I will walk through and the draft of 6170.1 transitional kindergarten are really a result of Assembly Bill 130, and they are a prelude to our UTK work that we've been talking about this evening. As we look at this board policy and the updates that are needed, you'll notice there are several areas struck through, and then the darker areas are the addition. The first set of additions is with regard to the updates to TK eligibility. As mentioned just a few moments ago, by the year 25-26, we would be offering a TK transitional kindergarten program to all 4-year-olds in our community. And as you can see, as the district, we have the option of phasing that in over the next couple of years, each year adding a few more months of eligibility to a pool of TK students who are eligible to attend. That is optional, and districts can choose or elect to expedite that process if that works with the district's local plan. Turning the page, the next dark section speaks to the curriculum and instruction used in a transitional kindergarten classroom. And you'll see a call out to the preschool learning foundations and the preschool curriculum frameworks. You'll also notice in the middle paragraph a reference to an extended day kindergarten program, and that in cases where that exists, there can also be an extended day transitional kindergarten program, which is very important as you look down to the next paragraph that references the 9-hour day of learning, that full day of learning that we are required starting next year to provide to students in transitional kindergarten on. The next section walks you through the different models that can occur. The state does allow for a TK-K combo. That would be something that we've done in the past, and we could choose to continue with that design. However, if we were to do so, as I'll mention in a moment, we would have to follow the requirements for a TK classroom, and the the ratio of adult to students would have to be at the more restrictive end. It would be the same thing if we were to go and follow the second model they provide, which is combining our pre-K with our TK program. If that model were implemented, then we would have all of the expectations for a state preschool program would exist in that classroom, including the 1-to-8 adult to student ratio. And then there's the option that's just speaking to transitional kindergarten as transitional kindergarten. And as mentioned, the ratio is 1-to-12, and there is consideration or thought that starting in 23-24, it might be 1-to-10. That is still to be determined based on funding. The last section is talking about the TK credential. Starting in August of 2023, TK teachers have to meet the requirement of also having 24 ECE, early childhood education units, in order to be highly qualified for teaching transitional kindergarten. And then the last section finally is speaking to a scenario where a kindergarten student is in transitional kindergarten. If a student is kindergarten eligible, he or she should be in kindergarten unless there's a continuance form on file. And these are the updates that were recommended by the model policy that's put out. Again, this is here for your information this evening, and then we'll look to adopt it at the next board meeting. And I am happy to answer any questions you have about any of the areas that I reviewed this evening.
I just have one. Mary's not here, but I'll use this anyway. The hours is a little confusing to me as far as the board shall establish the length of the school day in the district's TK program, which shall be at least 3 hours, but no more than 4. And then the expanding learning starts thereafter, so that 3 to 4 hours would academic or what have you, meeting standards, and then the others would be?
Yes and no. So first you have your program can be either 3 or 4 hours. Okay. Or what you could do is say, we have an expanded day for kindergarten, so we'll have an expanded day for TK. And that doesn't mean that you're just doing academics in the morning and art in the afternoon. It's your whole day is balanced.
Gotcha.
Right. And you have the full day to address the needs of the TK learner in a developmentally appropriate way.
Okay. I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
I have a question in terms of, as we're transitioning into the TK, what's that kind of looking like in terms of our preschool teachers? Have they been notified already? How, I'm sure there has to be a stair step in making sure our personnel need to move here or there, or how all of this mechanically kind of takes place.
And you're right, there are multiple layers to the transitions that are going to need to happen in order to fully implement TK for all 4-year-olds, and then even more layers that need to take place in order to expand that learning day to a full 9-hour day. And when we come back next to the next board meeting, I hope to then provide an overview and answer all of those questions to get your input for our next steps.
So currently, are preschool teachers being notified that this change is taking place?
Currently, looking into next year, everything in preschool looks exactly as it does now, with the exception of one school site, and that's Arianas Elementary. They've expedited this process and absorbed pre-K into TK. And in that scenario, they have both the preschool teacher and the TK teacher in the classroom together. Everybody stays whole during this transition time.
Thank you for clarifying that right now.
Well, and we've had partnership, HR and teaching and learning have had numerous with our preschool teachers, as well as association president, to talk about all these things that are coming down the road. There's also been additional meetings with teaching and learning and our pathway, and our letting them know all the different avenues we have for them to get their credential, their multiple subject credential, if interested. And we're fully transparent, communicating with them at all times. as well as their instruction. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that.
Question that I have is you had alluded to the curriculum, right, of what our kids will be learning. And this is a great opportunity, right, for the DEI folks that just presented, right, to make sure that our young people are exposed, right, to content, right, that reflects the diversity of our community and learning about people that are different from themselves. So have folks been meeting about that yet and what the content looks like? Does the state provide us like a set of standards or guidelines, or how does that work?
Yes, in that the state does provide very clear expectations, very clear guidelines, and the curriculum that's being used in our transitional kindergarten classrooms now is designed for both half day and full day. And so as we think about moving and transitioning to full day, we would just be using the more comprehensive version of the curriculum that we have that is on the state approved list that has been vetted with the lens that you're speaking to.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there are constant conversations around how do we ensure that our classrooms are culturally relevant, that we are meeting the needs of the learners we have. And, you know, one of the things that when we look at our preschool classrooms, we have bilingual teachers and bilingual instructional assistants, and the programs they're taught in a 50-50 type model of Spanish to English, because we're really wanting to take we're using the students' entire repertoire of language when we approach their learning in that way, and all of their experiences and how they enhance their learning when they're at school. And so our preschool teachers, our TK teachers, the team is regularly talking about that and how we ensure that we are utilizing translanguaging in the classroom and having that asset-based mindset. And looking critically at the curriculum that we have. Yes, it's been approved, but is it as culturally relevant as we want it to be? And if it's not, what can we do to ensure that it is? What can we add? What supplemental programs? What resources can we add to our classrooms to ensure that it is in fact culturally diverse, relevant, all of what you're speaking to?
That sounds really, really exciting, because it sounds like it's going to set up our young people as they move along and enroll in our dual language immersion, our dual language courses, right? Dual immersion courses. And then I also want to make sure that we're not forgetting to incorporate, indigenous languages, right, in our area, or, Arabic, for example, right? Whatever the languages are, right, of our community. But we know here, in particular in Santa Maria, indigenous languages, right? Mixteco, for example, being one of many. So I want to encourage the staff to also look into that, to see how we can honor that component, right, of our young people's culture.
Absolutely. And I think the work that we've done around the Seal of Biliteracy pathway has really highlighted that need to have that focus. And what we find is that many of our students aren't just bilingual, they're trilingual.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right.
Very exciting.
Thank you. Are there any other questions that I can answer?
Thank you.
We're here. Okay, that's what I mean. That's what I'm always here. Yeah, make a knowledge review of the board policy 6170.1 transitional kindergarten as presented, and request administration to bring this item back for approval on at the next regular board meeting. Item J, discuss technology support technician 1 job description. Ms. Beltran.
So good evening again. This is a project that's been long in the works, probably since January of 2021. No, March of, it's been in the works. We've overhauled the computer lab instructional assistant position, and I'm going to defer to our chief technology officer to really talk about this technology support technician 1 job description and the journey that we've taken.
Viewers are like really upset, and that's important. Sorry.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. So this is really about us trying to build more equitable support for our teachers in our classroom. The original job description goes back to 1998. I believe that painting is slightly older, but in technology, like 1998, to not talk about a technology job description for a really long time. And so kind of just a little like background, like the job description in 1998 was instructional assistant computer laboratory, right? Because that's where technology happened. You had to go to that one special room to have your time. We all remember that. We all, right, participate. It was the single point of contact for students and many teachers to get access to technology. It predates teachers having laptops in their own room for a lot of them. You know, then the quick evolution, it can be a lot longer than that. I'm giving you the cliff notes tonight. 2007, Santa Maria Bonita, all of our teachers laptops. Initially, that's just about attendance. Quickly, it turns into about curriculum. It snowballs. For us, our journey for student devices started in February 2013, where we had Taylor Elementary School. One of the two teachers retired this year. Said, "I think this could be really great for our students. We're already using Google Apps." So we were excited about bringing that to, from 2013. Obviously, that snowballed. Our needs have changed. Now we have one-on-one Chromebooks, of course, we've had for many years. That's 17,000 plus devices. We have a laundry list of teacher equipment that we're using to enhance our teachers' instruction. That's your classroom projector, your audio amplification, their teacher laptop. All this ties, of course, to our approved core and supplemental curriculum. More and more, there's digital resources built into that. Some are leaning more and more into that and away from even some print options. The only way you can get it in some cases is the digital option. And of course, a big piece of our moving forward, we've talked about communications, and yes, we do a great job reaching out, but we can always do better. That's always a popular conversation in this building about how can we improve our communications. And we believe these group of individuals can really help us leverage what we have, do a better job. You all know our vision for student success, right? It touches all of us. So when we're looking at trying to build equity for our students, like what does that boil down to? It's really similar. We must provide every student and staff with excellent tier 1 support every day, focus objectives and responses, right? It's that first call. We want to get it right away. We don't want them to have to make multiple phone calls. That means we have to have excellent support at the school sites, and it has to be equitable. The great support you get at Tunnel, we need you to have at Adam, Bonita, Fessler. And so that's really has been our goal about this job description, is really just clarify what the needs are and make sure that we're all operating with the same objectives so we can have the same response. I won't read you the entire job description. You know, it's kind of interesting. We have made some significant changes, but a lot of the meat is the same. It really is. But what I wanted to do is just kind of highlight for you some of the maybe more significant changes for you this evening. And of course, we're bringing this to you as a discussion item. Trying to bring this back to you in a few weeks as an action item. So we're calling out the assistance in the maintenance, minor repairs, or replacement of student devices. We need those Chromebooks, right, to stay ready for our students so that if there's some sort of problem with the Chromebooks, this team can help us get those repaired as quickly as possible. We need to prioritize and troubleshoot minor hardware and instructional software problems. That's really talking about the teacher's classroom. Right? We can't lose instructional minutes because we haven't sufficiently trained our staff to address those items. So we really are going to build the team to be more proficient in supporting the teacher hardware in the classroom. Tier 1. Assist with updating site to home digital communications. So we have great platforms. We've got a great website, we've got Parent Square. We can leverage that more, and we really want to let these people help us. Their piece wouldn't be the messaging, the construction of the narrative. Their piece is more, right, they listen to their teams. They have a communication team. They listen to the principal, listen to what the messaging needs to be, and then they execute. Let's get that on the website. Highlight Sanchez Elementary does a great job with it, right? They're going to be a model for us. See if we can have more look like that. Inventory. With this much equipment we have, it's really important for us to make wise purchasing decisions. Every year, we know exactly what we have. We've got a new crew of 2,000 plus kindergarten students coming in TK. We have to make sure we're making the right purchase. We can only do that if we have an accurate inventory. The last couple of weeks, they've all been helping, making sure that we have an inventory of all that equipment. Big job. Another significant change is we're increasing the number of days they'll be with us every year. So they're going to, in the past, it's been strictly 180. So when the students were here, they were here. There's a lot of prep that needs to happen before. There's a lot that needs to happen after. So we're increasing that to 190 days every year. So that's super exciting. In the past, their hours have been 6.5. Right? Again, kind of modeling when the students are there. But again, we really need them to be prepared to serve the entire campus before students step on. When we have substitutes coming, we want them to know that there's going to be a substitute in room 17. Room 17, today I've got to get you right away. that teachers walk into a space they don't know. I want to make sure that I've got that space prepared for them so that that substitute stepping into that space can have a great day. Like those sort of things that we really want to be proactive about. There it is in a nutshell. I'd love to answer any questions you have.
A question that I have is, it sounds like these folks are going to be, interfacing, right, or with our students a lot, right, and our staff. But I did notice in the job description, I don't believe I saw anything that said bilingual or multilingual preferred.
Mr. Valencia, with our classified job descriptions at this point in time, they're not part of those job descriptions. We will be adding additional things later as we negotiate with CSEA to look at adding that language. We've talked about that a few times when we've brought forth about 16 or 17 different job descriptions. It's going to be a work in progress.
Yeah.
And it was February of 2021 when we started this road for this job description.
Yeah, no, I definitely recall those conversations.
We'll still work at it.
And still important to raise up, right, to bring up. Because,
I understand.
If they're going to be working with our students, we know that some of our students come here speaking only Spanish, right? For example, many, not all, other languages as well. If we're looking for ways to improve communication with our families, somebody who's multilingual understands the challenges, right, of communicating in multiple languages and the difficulty, right, that comes with that. A question that I also had was, once an employee goes from 6.5 to 8, is anything above 6.5 considered full-time with benefits, or do they have to?
6.5 hours is already full-time with benefits, so that doesn't change that.
Okay.
And then the document that's attached to the job description is the agreement entered into with CSEA as a result of going to mediation with regards to the salary schedule. And you will note the salary schedule says range 25-26. And there's a process because our current computer lab techs will, they will be trained if they're interested in transitioning to this position. Otherwise, they're able to remain at the same range as a computer lab tech in a different role that also serves like supporting students, such as a student supervision aide or an instructional assistant if they're interested in that. But we do have a process that will be put in place that we've agreed to and worked out with CSEA as to the training and transition from one role to the other. And for the first 100 days, they'll be paid at range 25. And then if they're successfully transitioned to the expectations of the position, it'll be 26. So that's why that paperwork is attached there. Just wanted you to be aware of that.
And Ms. Beltran, what does that translate to into actual numbers? Because most folks don't understand, right? Range, salary range 25, 26. What is that salary range in actual numbers?
I don't have that salary ranges. There's a lot of them and I can't tell you exactly what the dollar amount is, but we'll have that information for the board for the next board meeting. It's just one range to the other. It is an increase from the prior range of a computer lab tech. CSEA really felt that there was a lot of new duties attached to it. And so that's where we have had the agreement to go 25, 26.
Previously.
And is the goal to have the one at each school site? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, sir.
And currently that's not the case, correct?
No, there currently is a computer lab instructional assistant, but this role is more robust with more service to. They're not a computer lab tech any longer. They're really working to support the site.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if we're
already has one.
But the answer to your question is yes. The expectation is we'll have one at every site. So where they have the lab technician every site, having the network support or the support technician one at every site.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to say thank you for the way you presented it in terms of thinking about how are we setting up our substitute teachers. I know that could be a headache, right? Especially if they're not comfortable with the technology and the setup of the classrooms. Some of them have different setups. So I really appreciate how intentional, you were about thinking about those things.
Okay, that the Board of Education discuss technology supporting technician 1 job description as presented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item C. Public hearing is open.
You're rushing to the mic.
Yeah. 8:37, public hearing closed. Thank you for reminding me, Mr. Hollingshead. There you go.
As Mr. King is getting his presentation ready for you, this will be second time we discuss the budget for next year. There's been a lot of information that's come out, and there's more information to come. But this is our second study session to, again, take another dive into the numbers, the resources that will be available to us next year.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Beecher. Tonight is the budget study session number 2. We are required to have 2 board meetings for the budget, one a public hearing, and the next board meeting where we adopt the budget on June 22nd. So this evening, we'll look at our summary of assumptions, our main revision and prospective proposals. We'll look at our adoption budget, multi-year expenditures by function, fund balance, and then we'll wrap it up. So the general assumptions: enrollment of 16,595, estimated ADA 14,900, but our funded ADA of 15,873. That's a result of that 3-year rolling average that I mentioned last time. Federal programs, we still don't know the COLA. And then also our STRS and PERS. So after 8 years of a steady increase, the STRS and PERS percentages are finally leveling off. You'll see for STRS for this next year, it's 19.10, and that continues out. And then for PERS, it's 25.37, and does kind of go down a little bit.
What does that number actually mean? The 25.37 for CalPERS?
That's the rate the district has to pay. So if someone makes $100,000, then we take for CalPERS, then we take 25.37% of their salary and send it to CalPERS for them for the retirement.
It's not their money, right? That's the additional expense that we have to pay to fund their retirement. It sounded like for a minute you said we take out of their 100,000 the 25%, but we for that additional expense to fund the retirement.
Yeah, it's a cost to the district to employ the employee.
Yep.
So, and looking back 8 years, so in 2014, STRS was 8.88% and PERS was actually 11.77%. So got significant increases in the PERS and STRS rates.
You haven't calculated how much the total percentage increase has been since then, have you?
Since 2014, it's gone up an additional 10.22% for STRS, and for PERS, it's gone up additional 13.6%. So, and it's basically more than doubled.
Crazy.
Yeah. Looking at our multi-year assumptions, we do remove one-time costs related to revenue and carryover of ending balances. We do contribute 3% of our general fund expenditures to our routine restricted maintenance account, and we do use our updated statutory rates. So down below there, you'll see the COLA that hasn't changed since last time I was here, 6.56%. But the 2 out years did change; they did go up 5.38 and 4.02%. Our ADA, when we budget a flat enrollment and flat ADA. That's 14,900. And then down below is the funded ADA with the 3-year rolling average. So we have our the May revision and prospective proposals. So first I wanted to talk about what is in our adopted budget from the May revise. So we do have that COLA, 6.56%. We do have we're calling it the declining enrollment protection. That's the funded ADA greater than the current year, prior year, or 3-year rolling average. And as I mentioned last time, that has helped us to retain an additional $12 million, not lose $12 million. Also, there's a one-time discretionary block grant of $22.3 million. Right now, it's considered unrestricted, and you can spend it on district can spend it on anything they like. But there is talk about with this block grant, they want to tell us how to spend the dollars. So we don't know yet. But also, we have the transitional kindergarten add-on, $780,000, and then the expanded learning opportunities program of almost $30 million. So some other items that were in the May revise but are not in our budget. We do use School Services of California's recommendations when we create the budget. And these are a few of the items they said, don't put in your budget, kind of hold on. They might change. There's not enough information on it. So I wanted to kind of highlight a couple of those things. There's an additional LCFF base grant funding of $266 per ADA. So it would change the COLA to an effective rate of actually 9.85%. There's not enough information yet on that. So they said, hey, don't put in your budget. There's also, we're calling it the COLA 19 ADA relief for 21-22 for actually this current year, where we use the higher of the ADA to enrollment ratio from either 1920 or this year. This would help us because our enrollment ADA to enrollment ratio in 1920 was around our historical average of 96.3%, where this year it's dipped down to that 89.8 as a result of COVID and the restrictions, protocols surrounding illness and isolation. So if that does happen, then it's a rolling effect. It would affect 22-23, and that would be an additional $4 million. There's also a one-time deferred maintenance fund. They do base it on our unduplicated pupil enrollment, and we don't have a lot of information on that yet. So moving on, some other budget items. We do continue to receive and spend the promised state and federal COVID funds that we first started receiving in 1920. So we've been allocated about $90 million in total. We've received about $50 million, and we've spent a little over $35 million. Next item is that 10% reserve cap requirement. That's why our previous items today were to commit some funds so we can stay under this reserve cap. On the right there is just a portion of the letter that we received from the state. That's the notification of the school district reserve cap requirements that take effect in 22-23. And then finally, it's in there so you're aware of it. It's the standard account code structure system. So the CDE has updated the SACS reporting system. What that is that's the system I use to finalize our budget, and it spits out the forms that you get. The budget book that I gave you and all the forms. It's replacing a system that's 30 years old. So this new system is online, but the CDE is still kind of working out the kinks. You might have noticed that if you look at the forms closely, some alignments and the bordering and things like that with those forms were kind of off and not as crisp and clear as previously. So it's a work in progress for them, but we are required to use this new system. So moving on to look at our 22-23 budget in our multi-year. So for 22-23, total revenue of $306.7 million, with expenditures of $307.4, transfers out of $3.5 million. So we have budgeted deficit spending of $4.2 million. In the 2 out years, we do take out those one-time revenue dollars and take out one-time expenditures. We do add in there a step and column movement on the salary schedule. So in 23-24, we have projected deficit spending of $8.8 million and then $11 million. So that last line there, this is ending fund balance as of June 30th, $126.9 million, $118 million, and $107 million. So you start with your ending fund balance, you take out the non-spendable amounts, you take out the restricted ending fund balance, and then you take out our committed funds that we committed this evening. And then whatever's left is the unrestricted ending fund balance, and that needs to be lower than 10%. And so for each of the years, we are falling under 10%, 7.5%, 8.8%, and 8.1%. So I want to look at our general fund expenditures by function. So function represents the what. So the budget expenditures are divided up among activities or services performed, and these divisions are collectively called functions. So the instruction and instruction-related expenditures make up 81%. That's teachers, aides, principals, front office. Services represent 7.7% of our expenditures. That's counseling, psychologists, health. We have our general admin, 3.6%. That's board, HR, business, the Sousa Center here. We have our plant services, makes up 6.5% of our expenditures. Facilities, custodials, grounds. And then we have our transfers to other funds, which makes up 1.2%. And that's for our certificate of participation payments. So moving on, program support. So as in prior years, the board has determined the need to invest unrestricted general fund resources in the following programs to support their outcomes above and beyond the dollars that we do receive from federal and state funding. And it's mainly special education and routine restricted maintenance. So our federal and state special education, the 21-22 numbers are our estimated actuals. So we anticipate a contribution of 9.6 and $9 million to support the special ed program. In 22-23, that does increase. A couple of reasons why are the salary increases for 22-23. We are adding some additional staff, psychologists, resource teachers, BCBA. Our routine restricted maintenance, we take 3% of our general fund expenditures, and that gets contributed to our routine restricted maintenance account. So I estimate 7.1 for this year and about $9 million for next fiscal year. Almost done here. Looking at our ending fund balance. This goes back to 2014-15 when the LCFF first started. So we're looking to end the year for 21-22 at about 130 million, just down to 126, then 118, 107 million in the second out year. And it is made up of restricted funds, committed funds, unrestricted funds. So in conclusion, the assumptions including this budget provide a starting point for the district. Where will the economy take the state revenue? Will the legislature support all of the governor's proposals? And I'll return on June 22nd so we can adopt the budget.
And any of those, the COVID funds that you mentioned, do any of those have a terminus or an end date, I should say, like the ones we've had previously?
About 16 different buckets of dollars, and they all have different timelines.
Okay.
3 of them, the timeline has elapsed, and we did expend all those dollars. And it's usually the next batch of September of 22, then September 23, and September 24. It's just the different requirements when they need to be spent. So we're spending the dollars that need to be spent first. We are spending those first.
And they're designated differently as well, or?
There's certain requirements for how you have to spend the dollars. Like I said, I call it 16 different buckets of restricted dollars about you can only spend these a certain way and these a certain way. And it's all related to, I just call them COVID dollars, but it's all.
Not that part hasn't really changed. It's just a matter of the different timelines.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I have a question around unrestricted funds. For example, some of our families today were talking to us about going on field trips, right? Sports programs and things like that. With unrestricted funds, do we have the ability to use our funds for things like that? Or can you tell us a little bit more about how unrestricted funds work?
I know you mentioned field trips. I know we do have field trips in the Lcap, a large dollar amount for each school site. But with our unrestricted funds, you don't want to have your minimum requirement of 3%. That gets you about 2 weeks of payroll if something did happen. So, we're at 7.5%, 9%, and 8.1%. So those aren't high percentages for our unrestricted funds. And
Brian, I can support with the field trips. So it is in Lcap that we do provide money to the school sites for field trips. It's also in Lcap that we provide the college and career ready field trips so that there's equity across our district, that all first grades are getting this, all second grades are getting this. It's not completely done yet because COVID. We were about to implement, COVID happened. Field trips this year were not impacted by money at all. Field trips were impacted by busing, number one, even more than COVID. And that's hard, you know, for folks to understand that first it was COVID, but then it was busing. And so all walking field trips have absolutely been approved, and we have money for that. We have funds for that. It was busing that was the big issue. We just don't have enough buses, enough drivers, enough buses. And so that was it. But we do have a lot of funding in our Lcap for those experiences for students, because that's important to us as well.
So for unrestricted funds, like let's say we as a board say, hey, we want to dedicate more funding for, you know, X activity. Is that where our unrestricted funds would come into play?
We as a board wouldn't.
Like if we wanted to talk priorities, for example, hey, we want to prioritize, you know, our students going to 3 universities next year. With unrestricted funds, is that where we could tap into funds to do that?
What I heard Ms. Dutra describe is that those funds are spoken for in the question would be find out to that end if that priority is already being met. That may already be in there. That would be one step. As far as sports programs, again, that wasn't impacted by dollars. That was impacted by the logistics. One, transportation, getting people to places available to us this year, and most of the guidelines were very restrictive around sports. Asking didn't make sense for us as a district. Next year, we'll see. You know, I'm expecting that we'll see news about what next year's going to look like pretty soon. There's some statutes that will expire, and there will likely be updated guidance that gets connected with that. And see what those guidelines look like. We'll hope that with our new transportation partner coming on, First Student will be our partner starting July 1st. Have access to more drivers and more buses. They don't operate in a bubble. Now, all of the drivers you might want and need, but I know they're working diligently on it.
A follow-up question that I have is, what do we use our unrestricted funds for? Do we have like certain things that we typically pay for through that source?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what do we use our unrestricted funds for?
Our unrestricted funds?
Yeah.
Pay for 90% of our teachers, administration, to keep the doors open. Kind of going back to that expenditures by function. Most of those expenditures there are from the general fund. That's our biggest pot of dollars, our local control funding formula, the dollars that we get from the state.
And if you consider the fact that the funding that comes from supplemental and concentration grant dollars are also unrestricted, all of those actions and services that are described in the paperwork that we were provided tonight, all of those come from unrestricted sources as well. They aren't necessarily that unrestricted general fund source, but they are unrestricted. All of those also are unrestricted. But as Mr. King said, the lion's share of the money we spend is unrestricted. Everything. Most of the salaries, lighting, utilities, just about everything we spend money on is.
Yep. Have any other questions?
I just would make a comment in terms of, what was presented tonight. If you look, this little box, which summarizes, expenditures in all of the different categories, where you get to the line where it says net increase or decrease in fund balance, those numbers in red mean that we're taking those out of our reserve funding to make sure that we pay for everything in our projected budget. So there aren't leftover dollars just waiting for us to be spent. There's no extra money that, if we wanted to, we're going to need additional classrooms for transitional kindergarten and full day kindergarten. If we had extra money, then we could do that. But we don't have the extra money. So we have to look at other funding sources for that.
Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
Peter's broke.
I'll acknowledge the receipt of the 2022-23 budget study session and direct administration to bring the item back for action to the next regular board meeting as presented. Item E, public hearing. Budget reserve requirements. Opened. Closed. Item F, review of budget reserve requirements. King.
Thank you. This will be a very quick item here. This item became required in 2015-16 from Senate Bill 858. Basically said, if you have an ending fund balance greater than your 3% reserve requirement, you have to tell us what your minimum reserve requirement is, which is 3%. You have to tell us the dollar amount that you have over that 3% reserve requirement. You have to tell us why, are the reasons why you have that reserve requirement. Ending fund balance over 3%. So that's a little history. And so we are required to bring this. So this, I'll go through 2022-23. So we have a total assigned and unassigned ending fund balance of 22.7 million. Subtract out a 3% reserve requirement. We get a remaining balance that needs to be substantiated of 13.4 million and 17.5 and 15.7 for the 2 out years. So down below are the substantiation, the reasons why we have excess reserve over our 3% reserve requirement. We do have a set aside for deficit spending in 23-24, 24-25. We do have a set aside for universal, I just kind of mentioned it, universal transitional kindergarten implementation.
Questions? I acknowledge the receipt of the review of the budget reserve requirements as presented.
Thank you.
Now we'll go back to item A, minutes of the Board of Education meeting. Mr. Valencia?
Yeah, I just wanted to check in with the board because typically when I review the minutes, I noticed that with each comment, typically there's like a 2 or 3 sentence summary of what each person's comment was about. And so I was just wondering why that wasn't included in the minutes this time. I noticed that we had 3 comments, but we didn't receive the 2 to 3 sentence summary. And the reason that that's important is as I review the minutes and check for accuracy, that also is like a refresher for me to say, oh yeah, this is what's on the minds of, our community members. So I was just curious, Kristen, for why that is, or for whoever knows the answer to that.
Sure. Oh,
I'll reply. Fine, Kristen. No. Kristen knows the work, but I want to respond to the question as the interim superintendent. Again, minutes, and last time we had a conversation around minutes, about how has been a part of the training and has a lot of different peer groups that she works with.
Can you speak into the mic? Because it's kind of hard.
Kristen works with, has been through several trainings, and then also works with a peer group to make sure that the work that she does follows the best practices that are out there for the kind of work that we're describing, one of which is taking minutes. Those practices find that the purpose of minutes is not about taking note of what people say, but taking note of what actually happened. So what you see is a statement about what actually happened. That's the intention of minutes. I know that in the past, time has been spent accumulating statements or summarizing in greater detail, but time constraints have really forced Kristen to review best practices and then adhere to them to make sure that all of the responsibilities that come with her role in the district can be met. And so that was one of the things that had to change, was really a strict adherence to those principles, that minutes are including what gets done in board meetings and not necessarily what is said. Good news is that Mr. Ricky has been able to provide us with a virtual reenactment using YouTube for board meetings, so that for posterity, there is a record of exactly what people described. Either if I'm reading or the superintendent is reading a memo that someone provided, or if someone's here to speak to the podium, their comments are permanently recorded on YouTube. So as long as there's YouTube, there's access to exactly what was said. But the purpose of the minutes again is to make sure and document what happened, what is done in the board meeting, and that's what's been captured in these minutes.
And so something I just want to, put on the radar of the board is just, I think if folks are going to spend, their valuable time, right, coming and making the effort to speak to us about, their concerns, I think one more way to encapsulate that and to keep it fresh on our minds as we make, decisions that are in the best interest of our students and their families, that, that we consider, continuing to include that. If it's the norm for school boards to exclude those comments, which it sounds like, the best practices are suggesting, then, I might understand. But if we're choosing to do that while other districts are choosing to include a summary, which I know definitely helps me as a board member, right, to keep items fresh in my mind, then I would encourage us to continue, right, to include not essays of what they said, right? In the past, I remember when we were getting a lot of comments during COVID about a year ago, it was 2 sentences, right? This person is concerned about that. This person is concerned about that. And yes, I think that obviously takes time because we're condensing, right? Sometimes 3 minutes long worth of comments. But I do think, right, it honors our commentators when, we can actually document and say, hey, yep, we've made note of it, right? Doesn't mean we agree or disagree or anything like that, but at least it's duly noted. And, I understand that YouTube is one avenue to do that, but, it also is harder to sift through, a 4-hour video. Tonight will probably be a 4-hour video, right? And so it's just something that I want to advocate for, that we continue to do, because I think it is worthwhile to honor the fact that families, students are coming to comment, right? And that I do want to show that it is worth their time, because if we just see the individual's name, we don't know what they're advocating for. We don't know what they're suggesting to us.
Can you clarify? So you're talking about public comment on item 4 in the draft?
Yes, correct.
So, for example, Kristen Kent, Central Coast Coalition for Inclusive Schools, says who she is and who she's representative of, but doesn't speak to her issue?
Correct. Yeah. And in the past, we would have the 2-sentence, summary saying Ms. Kent, said the following, right? Or suggested the following. But that's not included in the minutes. In the past, we have had that.
And I want to add real quick to that. The other risk that comes with trying to summarize what someone has said in their 3 minutes or their 400 words or whatever the limitations are, to try and accurately summarize what that person might think is important and failing to do so. Running that risk, which again is why not just the norm, but a best practice in the way that folks are trained to do minutes is to record what's done, happened, but not necessarily what was said, because to try and really summarize what a person believed was their main point accurately, you run some risk. That's true to what their perception of their priority was. Reporting what was happened and what is suggested for these folks.
So then is that basically, do we take a vote to continue, or because essentially what we're doing is we're discontinuing, right, a past practice? Before we were including it, now we're not including public comments. Do we like take a vote to support that or not support that, or is that a decision that's made by a superintendent or by some other body?
I mean, it's operational in my mind. This is the recording of the minutes. If it doesn't accurately record the minutes, then that. But this is what occurred at the.
So then there's no need for a vote from the board to continue it or discontinue the practice?
The board can express a consensus. It's not, because this is a discussion item, we can't really have a motion and a vote, but there can be an expression of consensus.
My suggestion might be, and Kristen, maybe I'll ask you, is that maybe perhaps, as maybe not a synopsis or your estimation of what the gist of things were, but maybe just the what the item addressed was. For example, this evening people were speaking to a want for junior high graduations. It could be that something that simple, or return to athletics. Is that something that, well, and Ricardo, I would appreciate your viewpoint too. Would that fulfill what you're asking about? And would that be something that sorry, I didn't mean to point. Would that be something that you would be comfortable doing in that limited capacity? Because we certainly don't want you to regurgitate or feel the need to type out an entire written commentary or try to interpret what the person's thoughts are, but there may be a subject to that end that could be a quick reminder to us. Is that something that's doable, or
that is up to the board? I just sorry. The public comment, with my experience with other executive assistants up and down the state and with working with CSBA, and they oftentimes bring in legal counsel that recommends things. And what I've learned in the last 2.5 years is that less is generally better, just to avoid misunderstandings and have something that's documented that way. And also, as Mr. Beecher was saying, how the YouTube videos, they're already solidified there as a permanent record. But if that's something that the board wishes to continue, they can.
Well, and then if you're writing something that conflicts with what somebody sees on YouTube, I mean, there's a whole.
Yeah,
I understand.
They'll person.
I see. Okay.
Even different than what they stated.
I started out a very wordy minute taker and I've got it down to like 5 pages now, but yeah.
It's awesome.
Part of the. But yes, that's certainly a
process that you have to go through to protect. To be protected, and that's why the video.
Right, and what I heard you describe was that in one of your trainings in the past, an attorney advised that brief avoid creating that detail. That was their advice
from a parent or somebody.
Because then that would also possibly open the door to having to redraft the minutes, that being pulled, and it would be more cost effective.
Well, I personally, I take notes on each public comment for that reminder. Rather than go back and look at what's here. So I appreciate that. But I also appreciate that what you did, Ricky, tonight with I think it was was it Maritza Ogin
The actual.
that asking for that to be addressed? You know, because I think that's the other thing that people don't understand when they make a public comment is that, I mean, some people understand that's why they make it the way they do.
Yeah.
But most people don't understand that they're not going to get a response. And so I think it was really helpful to this young lady.
Ms. Ramirez,
to have it be addressed so that she can have her questions answered, but then also it acknowledges that we heard her.
No,
right?
yeah, for sure.
So I think that was really cool. But yeah, I'll just keep taking my notes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody?
Thank you, Kristen.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Just thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I thought you were going to say something else. Anybody have anything they'd like to?
We have to approve the minutes.
Actually, because we moved it to discussion, we probably need to bring it back as consent at the next meeting to take action on it.
Acknowledge that we discussed the minutes and we'll bring it back for approval at the next board meeting. And Ms. Cordero, you have anything you'd like to say?
What I personally believe to be a positive outcome, we will continue to have Dr. Susan Salcido as our county superintendent of schools. As predicted, voter turnout was very low, but can't do anything about that. I drove around and I was a looky-loo at each of the junior high recognition events, their drive-bys. And I took a few pictures just, to kind of show that, staff was out there with their bubbles and horns and signs and decorated things and showing their support and lots of decorated vehicles and so forth for those that did complete and are moving on from 8th grade. So it just was a validation for me. I understand, what some of the concern is about the changes that have occurred over the last couple of years. And in my mind, I will stand behind the decisions that have been made because I personally believe that in how we closed schools, how we reopened, how we have offered the testing, how we have done all of those things, the bottom line has been the safety of our students and our staff. And I'll stand up to the criticism. And next year's a new year, and we'll see what continues to happen. But, we can't change what has occurred. We were in no way prepared for the things that have occurred and that continue to occur. And I think it's made us all realize what the impact of something can really be, on a system as a whole, because it affected every school system, not just ours. I'm proud of our teachers, proud of all of our staff for persevering under very, very challenging circumstances. And I'm looking forward to opportunities to visit some of our summer school activities, and would appreciate a schedule again, if you wouldn't mind. I think I have it somewhere, but I've been cleaning out and sometimes not overly being careful, but so Moving on to the next.
I just want to do follow-up because I was a looky-loo also. I do want to thank a lot of teachers, principals, classified parents went really creative on some of the ways to help celebrate the recognitions of sixth grade, the actual graduation / eighth grade activity kind of culmination. And Ontiveros had a clap out for their sixth grade. Everything was on the playground. They presented certificates in the classroom. Parents were invited to the playground. They had a runway decorated with balloons. Parents were all there. It was a huge clap out. Parents were invited to have brunch on the lawn with their sixth graders, all outdoors, all safe. Parents, PTA provided snacks and waters and juices and desserts so that people could just move around and just enjoy each other. Lots of conversation. It was really a fun activity to see happen. Teachers were very excited about something like this too, because it did give them the downtime to enjoy their students. Many times when we're doing recognition kinds of ceremonies, I who did one for 25 years with sixth grade, that's a lot to do on those last 3 days of school. But to see the parents, to see the grandmas, to see the tias, to see just everyone. I saw former students with their children there. It was a really fun sixth grade way to recognize students. And I know a lot of other sixth grade campuses or teachers did a very something similar, so it wasn't as regimented, but it was very delightful and very embracing as they were welcoming the seventh grade. I also was able to see junior high activity for eighth graders so that they had choice as to what they wanted to participate in. They had movies set up for them. They had the gym decorated with, I call them stations or centers because I'm so used to that kind of environment, but they had Game Boys. They had stations, they had big screens, they had cards, games, those big Jenga blocks. It was all, they had a DJ, those people that wanted to dance, and Bubanda, there was a little area for them. It was just everyone doing just a nice celebration of what closure was coming to in terms of the end of a hard year and acknowledgement that you could go and just have a really, really good time. I know several of the junior high schools really had raised some funds and purchased lots of yearbooks to give to students this year because financially that wasn't something a lot of students are going to be able to walk away with. It just wasn't going to happen this year. So it was a wonderful giving back to the students to have something to leave with also. And I would say anybody who couldn't really get a yearbook was really given the opportunity to find a way to get one. And so lots of donations went in, lots of teachers even bought yearbooks for students, but it was a fun thing for kids to do. So I thank all the staffs, all of the energy, all of the cariño that went into it, because it was very, very well received. Whatever happened in terms of, tainting a little bit of that graduation ceremony because it just wasn't going to happen, I know was felt by many, but just seeing the joys the kids had on campus and in some of those activities aren't visible to a lot of us who don't get to go onto those sites and see the children participating in those kinds of activities. They were very well embraced, and the energy that went into that is very, very appreciated by me, because I do appreciate the effort that went into giving our closure to the year. And I thank everyone for doing that. Amen.
Yeah, okay then. All righty. You guys hear me okay back there?
Got a teacher you want to recognize?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much out. I had to ask my kids if I did. I said, Sean, I don't remember. Ellie, it was Ellie who had Kate Miller.
Okay.
So Sean actually I said, who did you have for first grade? And that was the difference. Sean had Terry Tennant and Karen had Dory Tressler. And I remember that.
Dory.
Ellie had Marilyn Moore. She had moved down from third to first. And Ellie had Kate Miller in third. I do remember that much. That all being said, there were a couple things that came to mind, and some of it because I went out the other day to drop off water balloons at Jimenez.
Good one. I like that.
In being out there, and at my daughter's classroom, I also saw Laura Henderson, and I saw Mr. Ruiz, and I got to thinking, we really have not had an update or a DLI report from those guys for a lengthy period of time, understandably so. But at this point, I would like to request that perhaps that be agendized, and Dr. McDuffie coming on soon, that might be something that's appropriate for him to be onboarded with, because I do feel like that's it is a unique campus, but it's also something that I think, and Mr. Valencia refers to it, excuse me, a lot. It's a campus that can have an impact across our district on best practices and on literacy. And I, not only would like to hear about some of the needs that have changed since going to K-8,
yeah,
but also just on the effects on literacy and those kinds of things. There was one of the things I heard tonight was from one of the public comments was that being in not a biliterate classroom, but in a dual language classroom, or being a dual language citizen had adversely affected their literacy, their child's literacy. So I would like to I think all those things play into kind of hearing from Jimenez. And so if we could agendize that for when Dr. McDuffie comes on board, I'd really appreciate that.
That'd be good for him to get involved in just coming on and see what.
For sure. And I think to be honest, I think the last presentation wasn't inclusive enough, or as much as I would have liked to have seen of the teachers and the students. It was more driven by one parent. And I didn't think that was as effective as it could have been, because the focus was all really of the presentation was about, we want to go K-8, and they weren't responsive to our questions. I'd like to hear a more comprehensive summation. I have been to a few more campuses. What I've noticed on our campuses and what has been remarked to, and I saw James here tonight, is shade. So not just shade abatement for buildings, but shade for our kids, right? And so it is getting hotter year after year. It is getting drier. If you've ever been to, or if you had a chance to go to Battles this year, it's blazing hot anywhere near a building, anywhere on that campus. And so I think shade abatement is something that we need to look at in our plan. And I think when we start to talk about that, we can start to talk about renewable energy additions that we can make on our campuses as well. But not just the ones that you see over parking lots, but the ones that we see I just came back from multiple trips to Florida, and I've seen it in the Bay Area, where those shade structures for students are also renewable energy. So that's something we can contribute to our community and be an example of. And it's a two birds kind of deal. And then the last thing, and I'm sure everybody, there's probably at least, Brian said there were 18 people, there's probably at least 15 left. But I would like to thank our teachers and staff for the culmination of a really interesting year. Like, there was a huge transition from how school looked, where our kids were at the beginning of the year, where our staff was coming from and looking towards, and where we finished. And so I definitely, having the advent of visiting some of the campuses very late in the school year, I saw a lot of really great stuff. The STEAM day at Adams School was so
Thanks
cool.
for those pictures.
It was
cool.
so cool. And
That
the
was.
kids were all so into it, and the teachers were all so
Yeah.
into it, right? So I thought that was a really, really brilliant way to kind of wind things down, but also bring things together. So, that was really fun. And I, in the past, have quoted TV shows and movies and things like that, but I recently have seen two very completely different. One is called Drive My Car, and one was called Everything Everywhere All at Once. One is a 3-hour long, sedate, you got to listen to stay awake, kind of, I didn't have to have the toothpicks, but some people might. And the other is an over-the-top, absurd, out there, loud, obnoxious, crazy movie. But they really both revolve around what life is, right? And and where we are in the grand scheme of things, and talking and demonstrating that life is the stuff that happens all between the big events, to paraphrase a quote, right? So there's all these big things that happen in our life. There's all these things that happen during the school year, and it's those little things that you see going on in the classroom that are in between. That's the life of our kids, the life of our staff. I hope that our staff has the opportunity, and this is kind of I'll bring it home. Is my wish is for that our staff can have those moments during the summer, right? So that they can, so that all the rest and recuperation and all the fun they need to have with their families is there, but also those times in between that, the life that's in between happens, and all of that they need, because they really deserve it. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for a job to everybody here and at Sousa and all across the district for a job well done for the year.
Sure. Excellent work.
Tired.
A couple of them were retired. Saw it in the
Valencia?
Yeah, a couple of things that I wanted to mention were, I remember going to a CSBA training early when I became a board member. I think it was in the Masters in Governance program. One of the things that they mentioned early on was the importance of boards, like self-reflecting, having time to self-reflect and also to be evaluated also, because I know I'm always looking for ways to improve as a board member. One of the ways that I do that is by going right to the CSBA conferences, by reading their literature that they send us that's really informative. And so something that I wanted to put on the board's radar was, having us take some time, perhaps when our new superintendent begins, to look at ourselves, right, and say, hey, what are we doing well, and what are some areas for improvement? Because that's some of the feedback or some of the things that I learned from the CSBA program is, effective boards self-reflect. And I don't recall us, doing that yet. I'm not sure if our practice is doing it every 2 years, or perhaps we don't do it.
I think we had board retreats pretty regularly prior to the onset of the pandemic. So I think that would be a really great idea.
And self-reflection.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
We have all of this.
So the other thing that I wanted to just remind the board was that a couple of months ago in February, I had brought to the board some items to be agendized. The request from the board was to take those items to Mr. Lara, right? And I met with Mr. Lara shortly after that. And so I'm looking forward to having those items agendized. Will those be on the two board meetings from now, 2 weeks from now, the next boarding, or will that be?
For having the kids come in?
Yeah, it was a couple of different items. It was, what are we doing? What are we doing to address bullying, particularly around LGBT IQ students? That was some of the concerns that were raised by students. What are we doing to keep kids safe against COVID was a concern that was raised also when I met with students from Pioneer Valley High School. What are we doing to support ethnic studies in our curriculum, which is now a requirement for local high schools? Another item was, to what extent, right, are students being exposed, right, to diverse history, particularly Black and Latino history in their classes? And then lastly, it was the item about, how are we incorporating students into our inspiration time so that they could tell us, right? We had a fabulous presentation by El Camino Junior High School students earlier in the year where they laid out some of these things, right? They surveyed their peers, right? And so I just wanted to make sure that that was going to be agendized.
That will be agendized with Dr. McDuffie coming in, but I remember we talked about that and be able to get those all addressed. But I think pretty much for the COVID, I think we can read over that issue again as
Sure. Yeah, because these were brought up in February. Yeah. And so, just want to make sure we don't forget about them. And then I also wanted to, speaking of LGBTQ plus, June is Pride Month. And so I wanted to just show some love to our district staff and students who identify as LGBTQ or who identify as allies, right, to our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. I remember in last week's board comment, I believe it was from Ms. Kent, who works in the Santa Maria Joint Union High School District. She brought up the fact that when LGBTQ plus students are, they go through higher rates of bullying, and they also tend to have higher suicide rates. And so, and early in the year, our Camino students also raised that concern with us, making sure that we're addressing bullying in general, but bullying that impacts our LGBTQ students in particularly. So I just wanted to make sure that we're, our staff, right, are being trained. Maybe they are, but if they're not, I definitely want to see that, included in our training so that our staff are able to identify bullying when it does happen, discrimination when it happens, so that our LGBTQ plus students and staff feel safe, right, everywhere that they are. And then as I wrap up, I wanted to also just say also similar to John, thank you very much to our staff, right? It's been really tough, year, 2.5 years. We're still not quite through or over COVID at this point yet. Folks are still getting sick, right? And so I just want to thank, I want to thank all of our staff, our bus drivers, our cafeteria staff. I saw in our Friday updates that our staff are still working, our cafeteria staff, right? They're already setting up bag lunches, right? So that our young people are making sure that they have a meal over the summertime. And I had the pleasure of attending a retirement event that happened here in the district. Thank you very much to our staff. We had staff with over 30 years experience, right, that are retiring. And so I want to just thank our staff for their tireless efforts, their commitment, right, to our young people, to each other, so that we get through these tough times. And, our teachers, I'm in the classroom with you. In fact, today was my last day of school with students. And then, I came over here to the board meeting. So I definitely empathize and understand what a struggle it's been. And all the more reason, like John's saying, to celebrate and to treat ourselves good, to have that family time that we often sacrifice for the grading and the planning, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And also, even folks like our cross guards, right, crossing the street, we know that there was challenges. We know many of our students have gotten hurt, right, as they try to get to school. So just want to try to, and there's many other staff, of course, that I don't have the ability to name at the top of my head, but just know that you all are appreciated, and that we look forward to you all being well rested and hopefully ready to support our young people for hopefully will be a even better school year for next school year. So thank you all very much.
And I think with that, everybody hit everything I was going to say.
Mention the math night at Robert Bruce.
Oh, yes. Math night at Robert Bruce was awesome. Yeah. Got to go over there, interact with the kids, and see the parents so engaged with their children doing these math projects. And it was it was awesome. Then I got invited the following day to go to the talent show. That was even better. You got little kids up there telling jokes and the kids singing, and I mean, no fear. I mean, the place was packed with parents, grandparents. I mean, it was a full house. That was a fun hour and a half that I was able to sneak away from work. But yeah, great job. And like everybody else has said, props to you all. Been tough, but you guys stuck in there. Appreciate everybody. Done well by our kids and support them as parents. And I don't think there's anybody without a doubt know that you guys really deserve a big break and get some relaxation. And like Mr. Valencia said, we got another year coming and start off fresh.
You're right, Mr. Lara. I heard many great things from each of you tonight, reaching out and thanking our staff. And so I won't go into great detail either, except to say, as we were in that and getting ready for that retirement reception we had last week, it occurred to me that this year was the first time in 3 years that we started the year with all students on campus and ended the year with all students on campus. And so, I'm talking to peers that are in other industries saying, this is a year end that we've been waiting 3 years to have. And so it feels very different than any year end. And every choice that we made about this last 3 years has been that we want to make these things happen. And then how do we address COVID? How do we address this? To get to a point now where we did have students on campus, every student on campus all year long, was really important. Years ago, we were really grateful that all students got to come to campus, even if they couldn't be on campus at the same time. It was really important to make sure that they came to campus, found connection. The next year, grateful every student got to come back. They were ready for campus. They had exposure to it and they were. I'm looking forward to next year where students who return to us will have had a whole year on campus with every other student at that time to make connection. Themselves and not, all year putting students first, all year working through the restraint of COVID, the resistance of COVID to make sure those kids had the best education possible, but take time for themselves, for their families, for their loved ones, ready to come back recharged for next year. And I don't want to not say there are lots of folks who continue to work throughout the summer here at the Sousa Center. Our custodial staff, our food service workers will be doing extra work. Our teachers will be doing extra work. We'll have all kinds of office staff doing extra work, and all of our folks in maintenance who are right now getting ready, right? Already getting ready for next year, right? Because that's what it takes. It takes all summer to get ready for next year. So those folks who continue to work to be, we also need to make sure and set aside some time summer, a reset and recharge for next year. We're excited for what will come after a whole year of all kids on campus.
Well, with that, we'll adjourn till June 22nd.